counting us down, Anne, are you?
We're live.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining the meeting this evening. So I'll read through our conditions first. So all members have been asked to join this meeting beforehand, which I'm sure they have, and now we're starting at 5 o'clock. So just please make sure that your camera and microphone are working properly. To activate your corporate backgrounds if you haven't done it, and to turn off your microphones and cameras until invited to speak. Please click on the raised hand in the chat box when you want to speak, and then we'll invite you in strict order. Please only use the chat function to speak, vote, make a declaration or raise a point of order. Please don't use it to message each other. And obviously remember to turn your microphone and camera on when it's your turn to speak, and turn them off when you are finished. So I now declare the meeting of the City Council open. This meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021 and the Remote Meetings Protocol agreed by Cabinet, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you all switch your cameras off and mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there's no unnecessary background noise, and to help both with the audio and the visual quality of the broadcast. Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind, I know I'm repeating this, but your chat function is switched on, and to use that facility to indicate to me when you wish to speak on a particular item. For the benefit of everyone watching on the live stream, when I invite members to cast their votes on any particular item, they will do so electronically using the voting facility in the chat function. The votes will be automatically counted and are recorded on the system, but individual votes are not identified on the screen, and the chat room poll is not available on the live stream for public viewing. However, I will announce the numbers of votes cast for or against and any abstentions before I declare the result. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for public viewing as soon as possible. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. So the first item are apologies. Now, I've received apologies for absence from the following councillors. Richard White has got dispensation anyway, but Ken Critchley, Gail Giles and Mark Whitcutt, as I understand, but there's a possibility that Mark is with us. I'm not quite sure. If he isn't, perhaps record his apologies. If he is, welcome to the meeting. Are there any other apologies for absence, please?
Councillor Chris Evans, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anyone else?
Wilcox, Mr. Mayor.
Wilcox. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
No, I'm here. I've been here for the last 15 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Well done. Welcome aboard, Baroness.
Croeso, a happy St. David's Day, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So are there any declarations of interest at this stage, please?
No, sir.
If any do arise during the meeting, please raise your hands and we'll record them then.
May I say something first, please?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Yep.
It's about Councillor White. His wife passed away, sir, and
yeah.
If anybody wants to get in touch with him, will they please go through me first, please? Thank you. Put this down. Thank you.
Tom. Yes, that was going to be in my mayor's announcements, but I'm sure we are all thinking of Richard at this difficult time for him. So item 2 now is the minutes. So the minutes from the 25th of January 22 are before us. Are there any points of accuracy, please? All okay with that? So I move the minutes as a true record. And is there a seconder for that, please? We've got a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I think Tom was with that. So with all those in favour, please indicate by clicking on the voting application in the chat box. And I'll give you all a short time to get in. I think Councillor Watkins is having some difficulty connecting up, and perhaps you could see if we can do something with that, please. This is Councillor John Watkins. Okay, so can we now please vote? Okay, in that case, I think that is carried. I think Joan is with us, but your camera's on. Joan, can you put your camera off, please? Next is our appointments. So Councillor Harvey to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In addition to the appointments currently in the pack, there's also Marpus Park Primary. Councillor Gavin Horton will be attending that, and I got some heads of service appointments. So do you want to do the first, then move on to the appointments?
Yeah, can we move the appointments? The appointments you've just indicated first, then we'll move on to the heads of service, which is a notification anyway. So
Yeah.
So let's start with the first ones, please. So you propose the ones that are in the report with the addition of Councillor Gavin Horton.
Yes.
Councillor Fairweather, will you be seconding that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I now invite members to vote on those appointments, please.
No voting option, Mr. Mayor.
No, there's always that frisson of excitement whether the box is going to pop up or not. Can somebody find it for us, please?
And I do apologise for earlier. I was really struggling to get in.
That's okay. That's fine. Right, here we are. The box up there now. Members, please cast their vote. Okay. There we are. That's carried as well. So next, Councillor Harvey, the list of appointments. They are before us. You can read them out if you wish.
Yeah.
As we point out, these are for information purposes only and don't require ratification by the council.
Yeah. It's the head of service appointments. So the head of region and economic development is Tracy Brooks. Head of environment and public protection is Sylvia Gonzalez Lopez. Head of People, Policy and Transformation is Tracy McKim. Head of City Services, Stephen Jarrett. Head of Children's Service, Natalie Poyner. And Head of Prevention and Inclusion is Caroline Ryan Phillips. And I give them all my warmest congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Price, do we need to vote on this or?
No, that's purely for information, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. So next, are there any dispensation requests that Councillor Harvey may wish to request for extended absences for the purposes of Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So now we will move on to police issues. Once again, I'm pleased to welcome Superintendent Vicky Townsend to the meeting. So may I remind members, if they wish to put any questions to Superintendent Townsend after her presentation, then please use the raised hand facility in the chat box or chair box, as it says in here, and I will invite you to speak in the order indicated. So Superintendent Townsend, please.
Mr. Mayor, I believe that we're having technical difficulties with trying to join Vicky Townsend.
It's okay, no, I am here.
Oh, excellent, well done.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, apologies, Mr. Mayor. I am here. I'm having technical issues with the camera, so you can't see my face tonight, but you have got my voice.
Good, that's fine.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your patience with my technology. Just a few updates at the start of the meeting in relation to some queries we had last time, which I think it was helpful to update you all on. So I know that a few concerns were raised in relation to antisocial use of vehicles, particularly cars and off-road bikes, and we've done some work with our RPSO department to highlight better what it is that we're actually doing. And since the last meeting, I can provide some figures in relation to this. So since the last meeting, we've had 5 vehicle seizures, all for antisocial use of cars, and 7 Section 59 warnings were issued. What we haven't been particularly good at is advertising that yet. So we've now got a bit of a campaign which is running, so you'll start to see that a little bit more proactively moving forward. One of the other concerns that was raised last time was in relation to the changes to the highway code. So hopefully people saw it, but we did some work on social media and with our corporate comms team to both highlight and signpost individuals to the education campaign that was being run by the DVLA. So hopefully that was seen. Since I last spoke to you all, I'm sure you're aware of a number of pieces of work that's been going on in and around the area, but I suppose I would be remiss not to reference Storm Eunice and some of the work that's come as a result of that. Quite a lot of incidents were reported to us, particularly on the main evening of the storm. Lots of damage caused by people and lots of demand for officers. So very grateful to all the assistance that we had from the communities in dealing with those issues, and the patience that we had from people in terms of a lot of the road closures that had to be put in place, and people being moved from certain locations for some safety issues. So a thank you from me to everybody and for their assistance in those matters. And then just touching on one other point in terms of some really positive news, you're probably already really well cited on the officer uplift numbers that we've been receiving over the last few months, and to come in the next few months, certainly up to March 2023, we're going to be welcoming 15 new police officers this month, frontline officers. So that's some really positive news for us in terms of supporting the work that we're doing to respond to incidents in and around our area. So quite a lot going on. We've managed to obtain the services of a dedicated comms specialist, and I know a couple of you separately have raised some queries to me in terms of our local areas knowing some of their local officers, particularly because we've got lots of new individuals, new inspectors moved in. So we're going to be starting a campaign later on this month in terms of knowing your team and knowing who they are. And this is going to be led by Holly Butler, who's a specialist in our area in relation to this piece of work. But we're going to put a slightly different slant on it, and we're going to do it around knowing your community. So it's not about just knowing us, but it's about what's available in your area. And hopefully we'll be calling on some of yourselves in terms of your views, in terms of the best people to showcase some of this. So that's really positive, and hopefully you will see that shortly. But it's been a busy month, all in all, in terms of the demand and in terms of some of the incidents that we've been dealing with, very varied in their nature. And if there's any questions in relation to anything that's been going on, I will most certainly do my best to answer them.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Are there any questions? No? Councillor Harvey?
Councillor Harvey's indicated in the chat bar, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
But the leader would normally go first.
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself there. Right, so apologies, leader. So can I invite you to say a few words before we open this up for any questions that members may have? My other problem is I can't see the chat bar, Mr. Price, so I'm not sure who is. You'll have to do that for me. So, Councillor,
yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mudd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for that. Thank you, Superintendent. It's really good to have you back here again, and good to hear those updates. It's really positive about the resourcing issues. I'd really like to give my thanks on behalf of the local authority for the excellent partnership working that we've experienced over the past month or so. We have faced a number of challenges, and it's been really positive to work so closely with our colleagues in Gwent Police. I did want to raise an issue in relation to one area of Newport that where residents have contacted me about issues, and that's Pill. I think residents there are very keen to better understand the impact of the public space protection order that has been implemented there, and we would really welcome some feedback for you on that, particularly around any enforcement activity that's been undertaken in relation to that, because I know that that was a significant action for the community, and they're keen to hear what impact that's actually had. So if we could have some feedback on that, that would be fantastic. And just at the local level, I'd like to give my thanks of my ward colleagues to you, to pass on to Sergeant Paul Turner who was very, very helpful when he came on a ward walkabout with us recently. We were able to take him to some particularly problematic hotspots, and I know that he has an action plan in place in readiness to deal with some of those issues, particularly the problem that we've had with off-road biking at St David's Hospice. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for Sergeant Turner's efforts. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Lisa. That's really helpful. Just in terms of the one issue, funny enough, it was a conversation yesterday that I had with James Bryan in relation to PIL, which actually changed the focus from a Know Your Police team piece of work that we're doing to the Know Your Community team piece of work, and she identified some spots for us in and around the PIL area that might be useful for getting that piece of work off the ground. Now, the intent is for it to be rolled across the east, but actually it might be a really useful place for us to start that work as a bit of to test to see whether or not we get it right in terms of the feedback we receive from the community. And I will most certainly get some of those details for you in relation to the order. I've had an initial update from Claire Drayton, the Cadro, but I will get you some more information and feedback back directly and then through here.
Thank you, Superintendent Townsend. Thank you, Leader. So the first question, I think, is from Councillor Harvey.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to bring to your attention, I've had a few residents that have dialed 999 for a serious incident, and they've been told that officers will attend the following day. Now, it's not good enough. You know it's not good enough. I know you do. But is there an issue with dialing 999? Because it's quite a few times it's happened now, and I'm getting very concerned about it.
So 999, the priorities have not changed for 999. So 999 should be used if there's immediate threat to life, if there is a crime in action, or if there is a significant disruption within the community. We review as a force 999 response times every single day, and gold holds the control to account. There's been no issues for which I'm aware of in terms of answer times or response times to those calls. Obviously, the content of a call I won't particularly be au fait with, and there are occasions if somebody rings 999 and it's not a 999 call, so they will be redirected to 101. So, Councillor, apologies if I haven't got a full answer, but if you'd like to send me the details of the individuals, I will certainly look into all of the cases and give you a full update in relation to them.
Yep, that'd be brilliant. And I also want to just bring to your attention two of the PCSOs from Orway Ward, Robin and Joe, are volunteering on another litter pick again this Sunday. They really are doing an amazing job, especially engaging with the youngsters playing football in the kickabout, basketball and whatever. So I just want to give them a nod to you that they're doing a brilliant job.
That's fantastic to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Next, please, Mr. Price.
Councillor Suller.
Councillor Suller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Superintendent Townsend, it's just a warning. I had a phone call yesterday from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs saying that I'd be prosecuted because I sent the wrong form in. No, I think that's a scam. So could you make people aware of that, please? Because some people get very frightened, you know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So a HMRC scam, yeah, we've seen quite a few of these over the last few months, unfortunately. We can put something out via our social media desk, and if you've been directed to a particular web page, I can more than happily put that out, but otherwise we can put our general cyber warning out. That's not a problem at all.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Braxton, sorry.
Thank you, Tom. Next, Mr. Price.
Councillor Jevons.
Councillor Jevons, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Superintendent. Very good news on the uplifting officers, and I'm sure we all welcome that. And thank you for the work that you've done recently regarding the racing traffic on the Southern Distributor Road. With those new officers, I was just, it's an ask really to perhaps deploy some of those or your PCSOs on some of our active travel routes, which some of our youngsters are using on electric scooters. which are very, very quiet. And we do get those routes being used very often by young families who get a little bit of a leash to allow their children to perhaps run around a little bit on these safe routes. But you can hear these scooters coming, and we discussed this with Inspector Corley last Friday. And God forbid if there was an accident with one of these routes, I fear that one of those children would end up worse off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The electric scooters are an interesting one because obviously there's specific offences which they attract. I'm not yet aware of a prosecution locally in relation to them, but that's not to say that it's not something we can't look at if people are committing these offences. It'd be really useful to know what the specific routes are. So I'll tie in with the inspector in relation to the conversation that you've already had. In the first instance, obviously, when our new recruits start, they're going to be tutored for a little while. So they're going to be partnered with more experienced officers. And then some of them will join our local neighbourhood teams and some of them will join our response teams, but all in and around the Newport area. And, you know, given these issues, if there is a call or an issue, then anybody needs to respond in the same way. But I'll have a look at this one specifically because I'm not aware of the e-scooter route issue. So I'll just educate myself on that one, Councillor. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Price.
Councillor Horain.
Councillor Horain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Superintendent, first of all, thank you very much for the short intro because obviously it allows more time for questions from members. I'd like to again draw attention to the Gleeblands and Brecon Park because these are nests of drug dealers and people who take these hallucinatory substances. Now, we've looked at it before, but unfortunately, these things are effectively off-road. So just sending a police car along doesn't do much for it. Brecon Park has got 4 entrances. Gleeblands have got numerous entrances. And I, of course, listened to your explanation and your insight from Blaenau Gwent, where you were previously stationed, and I really welcome that, but it doesn't seem to be getting through to the ground. So could you have a look at it again, please? Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a problem, and it's certainly not a case of looking at it again because it hasn't gone off our radar. We're doing quite a bit of work in terms of how we tackle this because it's not an easy subject, as you're aware of. We've got a couple of lessons that have been learned from elsewhere that we're trying to put into practice, but also working quite closely with RPSO, which is the road policing contingent that we have in terms of how we manage some of this, because I'm in complete agreement with you. It needs to be dealt with. It's slightly more difficult than dealing with some of the traditional issues, but that doesn't mean that we can't look at it. So be assured, it's not off the radar. It's just not a quick fix.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Horain. Next, Mr. Price, please.
Councillor Holly Townsend.
Councillor Holly Townsend, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I've got 2 things just to ask, if that's okay. So firstly, e-scooters are a big issue in St Julian's at the moment, particularly around the Heather Road area. We've heard from police that they're reluctant to seize and confiscate the scooters. So why is this, and can you commit to a zero tolerance approach across Newport? And secondly, residents have raised concerns about the lack of public meetings held. So would it be possible to work with us to reinstate the ward meetings? Thanks.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor. I didn't catch the issue. Was it scooters on Heather Road?
Yeah, scooters. Yeah, e-scooters.
Lovely. Okay. So I probably go back to the same comment that I made in relation to Councillor Jevons' update. I wasn't particularly aware of the update in terms of the intelligence of an increase in e-scooters. So I need to do a bit of work myself in relation to reviewing these. And as I've already said, there is particular legislation that deals with e-scooter related issues. Now, if you look at the legislation, it doesn't actually cover all e-scooters, but it does cover the majority of those. So what we need to look at is what offences are being committed and where, and then what legislation is relevant to those offences. But e-scooters are really dangerous. People do get injured for them, as I'm sure that you've seen. in the past. So we do need to be quite proactive in terms of identifying and dealing with these. So leave that with me, because I'll pick it up as part of the Councillor Devon's inquiry as well, and I'll apply the same theory across the whole of Newport. In terms of your second point, apologies, I missed the second element of the question.
So I just said that residents have raised concerns about the lack of public meetings. So I was just wondering whether you'll be able to work with us to reinstate our regular ward meetings.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Funny enough, this has been raised with me separately as well, which is really helpful. So there's been a couple of things I think that probably we've been responding to in relation to the pandemic, and as a result of that, they probably have changed in terms of their appearance, as the traditional surgeries that you're aware of haven't been occurring over the pandemic. So we are doing a piece of work. You will see them more regularly, and what we will do is advertise them more in advance than we currently are, so you get an appropriate opportunity to respond and be present should you wish, or at least notify your members where we will be.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next, Mr. Price.
No one else is indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you. So in that case, it just thank you, Superintendent Townsend, for your efforts today. I'm sure members, although I say this at every meeting, I'm sure members are aware that they can email you with any issues that might occur. And don't have to wait for the next council meeting to bring things before you. So thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Horain has indicated in the chat box. I'm not sure whether that's a legacy hand or whether he wants to speak again.
Councillor Horain, do you wish to say something again?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Price. Just to advise Councillor Townsend that when we met with the police last Friday, this issue of board meetings was raised, and of course, because we are going into Purdah in the not too distant future, it's unlikely any will happen. But of course, I'm more than pleased to attend any ward meeting within St Julian's. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Horain. Okay, so once again, thank you, Superintendent Townsend. And for those of us that are successful at the next election, I'm sure we'll see you again after May.
Yeah, thank you ever so much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for attending. Now, next we move on to item 5, which is concerning the situation in Ukraine. Just before I ask the leader to come in, I was trying to find a quote really which summed up where we are with it, and I think a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. is very apt. And he stated that our lives begin to end the day we remain silent about things that matter. So, Councillor Mudd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that really profound and really very important quote that does actually capture the time that we're in. So, Mr. Mayor, can I move that we waive the standing orders so that we can move to the next item that we'd like to propose, please? Okay, so first what we have to do, if I'm correct, Mr. Price, we have to vote. Matthew has to second it first. Matthew?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, because standing orders require notice of any motion, then officially you have to suspend standing orders to allow this emergency motion to be moved and debated. So the leader has moved that you suspend standing orders. So if you can invite Councillor Evans to second that and then put it to the vote.
Yeah, Councillor Evans to second that as well, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Now, members, we're going to vote on the suspension of the standing orders. This isn't about the motion yet. Once the leader stated the motion, then we'll discuss it, fully. So this is just a vote on the suspension of standing orders. So could members now please vote? Okay. Okay, that's carried then. Leader now, please, will you introduce the item? I believe that all members may not have seen this. I think so, perhaps.
It's been posted in the chat bar, Mr. Mayor, the wording.
Yeah, so it's posted in the chat bar, but the leader will also speak to it, and you'll read it out as well, leader, will you?
I'll read it out now, Mr. Mayor, and reserve my right to speak to the end. Thank you. So thank you very much for that. And Mr. Mayor, may I thank the Leader of the Opposition and all colleagues present this evening for their support for that, in order to enable us to discuss this very important motion that I'd like to present to full council this evening. Newport City Council deplores the unacceptable aggression that President Putin has taken against the people of Ukraine, bringing war once more to the continent of Europe. We stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Newport has a long and proud tradition of giving sanctuary to refugees, and we are ready to do what we can to help those having to flee their homes and country as a result of this cruel and unwarranted invasion. The actions of the Russian government do not respect the rule of international law or the United Nations, and are rightly being condemned by democratic nations across the world. We will support all efforts to secure a peaceful and diplomatic solution, and for conflict and loss of life to be avoided. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Now I believe that I have to ask if there's an amendment to this motion. Is that right, Mr. Price?
First of all, is there a seconder, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, sorry, a seconder to that, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to formally second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
Does Councillor Evans want to speak now, Mr. Mayor, or later in the debate?
I'm happy to speak now, Mr. Mayor, in support of the motion.
Okay, yes, yeah, fine then. Okay.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the Leader of the Council for asking me to formally second this motion. I don't think there's a single person across the city who hasn't been deeply shocked by the terrible scenes we are witnessing in Ukraine. Ukrainians have displayed awe-inspiring bravery and heroism in the face of Russia's attacks on their sovereignty and freedom. And we need to keep providing all the economic and military support we can to help those protecting their country. Locally, I'm heartened to see so many residents and organisations providing much needed clothes, toys for children, and even items for their pets. It is incredibly difficult to really understand the pain, trauma, and fear these people are going through. But just watching the news and pictures of a mother whose young child has cancer, having to flee and no doubt leave her husband behind to fight, puts our problems into perspective. We take our freedoms for granted, and I guess there will be a significant number of Russians who are also horrified by Putin's actions, but fear reprisals. You can still watch Russian TV and distorted view of the situation, but it's important at times like this that we recognise how lucky we are. Mr. Mayor, I must confess I've seen some pretty atrocious statements on social media from all sides of the political spectrum, but thankfully from a mindless minority. At times like this, we need to show unity and solidarity as a city and stand together with Ukraine.
Thank you, Matthew. So, Mr. Price, I have to ask if there's an amendment next.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Are there any amendments to the motion that's been put forward, please? No. Okay, thank you. So now we can move to the debate, or well, comments on the motion, really. I'm not going to curtail what people say on this because it's just a dreadful set of circumstances. But we need to give as many people who wish to speak the opportunity to speak on this issue. I mean, perhaps I could start it off. I suppose that it just is a tragedy for everybody concerned. You know, those of us that thought that war on the major part of Europe was finished with really are quite amazed at the turn of events. Really, I'm sure we all support the Ukrainians in their struggle, and I think the best comment is that Ukraine will exist a long time after President Putin is gone. So thank you. So have other members got comments, please, on the motion?
But we've just posted the in the chat box the show hand facility, but going back to the previous chat box in terms of the suspension, Councillor Wilcox indicated there.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I didn't think that one of the last times that I would speak at Newport City Council would be on such a dreadfully serious matter. But thank you very much. So Putin's invasion of Ukraine is unprovoked and a dreadful violation of international law. He totally disregards the people of Russia and the Ukraine. The situation is changing by the minute. We don't know how the next few hours, days, or even years will evolve. But we are united in Newport, in Wales, and in the UK to hold Putin and his heinous acolytes to account. He has falsely justified his attack as Russia faces no threat from NATO or Ukraine, and global politics will have far-reaching implications for future interaction with Putin's Russia. We need to ensure that we cut Russia out of the Western economic system. We need to target the finance, energy, technology and defence sectors, as well as individuals linked to Putin and the Russian government. The UK government must now fully clear corrupt Russian money from the United Kingdom. Allies of Putin are still able to use the UK to launder dirty money, so we need to see the full implementation of all the recommendations of the recent UK government's Russia report. To defeat Russian aggression, we need to do more than simply attack Putin's bank balance. Sanctions must be as comprehensive as possible, but we need a broad response to face down his aggression. To defeat Putin, we need to unite against the ideology of what Putinism stands for, an ideology that's mirrored in the despots and dictators we see in the rest of the world, in China, in Middle East and beyond. These despots will be watching every single move we make from today onwards, and we need to ensure that our response is strong and determined, because they will determine their next moves based on what we do in the UK. We must never allow our determination to confront Putin to obscure our desire for friendship and peace with the Russian people. Whatever happens in terms of fighting on the street, and the determination of the Ukrainian people cannot be in doubt. We need to ensure that we give them not only the fullest humanitarian support, but the tools to do the job to fight this awful aggression. Let us fully support them and support this motion.
Thank you, Baroness Wilcox.
Councillor Harvey.
Councillor Harvey next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I never really thought that we'd be here debating this. It is absolutely horrific when you see those children being handed to strangers to get their children to safety. The way I see it is, how would you feel if that was you in this country with your child, trying to get your child to a place of safety, trying to get your mum and dad out so they don't get bombed by a raving lunatic? There's no words to describe Putin. Evil is too good a word for Putin. He's worse than that. And if anyone disagrees with us being open and welcoming to these refugees coming over, well, shame on you. They need our help. They need it now. And as just plain basic human beings, politics aside, we've got to do what we can to help get these people here and keep them safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Next, Mr. Price.
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hang on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hang on, get the camera working. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's right that we stand with Ukraine. What we're seeing currently in Europe is a despot invading another country, a man who is currently threatening to use nuclear weapons to get his own way. We're waking up to the realization that we're seeing the culmination of years of planning. Ukraine was first attacked in 2014, and since then, Russia has strategized and delivered an information war across the whole of the Western world, interfering with our election processes. And this is just the next stage, with Russia attacking a neighbour and making aggressive overtures to other countries in Europe. We are right to be afraid, but importantly, it's right that we stand with Ukraine and support them at this time of need. Whilst our national government is implementing sanctions and working with the UN and NATO regarding next steps, we have a role to play in supporting Ukraine residents who are fleeing from a war zone. As a city, we are proud of what we do in supporting and providing sanctuary to asylum seekers and refugees from war zones from across the world. Our stance and support for Ukraine citizens can be no different. We are a city that is diverse, and with that comes vibrancy and a sense of community, and we celebrate what makes us different, but we also intrinsically support because we are one and the same. We are human beings. We work to support and care for residents of Ukraine, and I support this motion. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Mr. Price, next one, please.
Councillor Lacey.
Councillor Lacey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this motion. As my colleagues have previously said, it's almost like we're waking up in a nightmare and watching the TV and listening to the news over the last 4 days is just unbelievable. Who would have thought that, you know, we're back to pretty much a war in Europe? I'm struggling to discuss this with my children and to calm them down because they're hearing things on the news. And I would like to pay thanks to the education providers in the schools who are trying to explain to the children and the younger adults of exactly what's going on calmly and rationally, because they're picking up on some, you know, pretty horrific things that they're seeing. I can only support and furthering the sanctions and the economic sanctions that are going on across Europe. And even though some of us are going to feel the pinch on that, Ursula von der Leyen quite rightly said today, there is no price on freedom. Freedom is priceless. So, Mr. Mayor, I absolutely support this today.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey. Mr. Price, next person, please.
Councillor Forsey.
Councillor Forsey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the others have said, it's an utterly heartbreaking situation, and we must do whatever we can to support the refugees until they can safely return home again. My nephew the other day asked me whether we still have conscription in the UK, and the thought of people fighting and dying is just so hard. I'd like to commend the efforts of people such as Women of Newport to make collections to help people, and by Mick Antonou doing a financial collection for medical supplies, and UNICEF supporting children, and I would appeal to anybody to support you in whatever way you can. I completely support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey. Mr. Price, next one, please.
Councillor Whitehead.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It goes without saying, I support everybody in their passionate speeches tonight. I'm not going to go into a diatribe. I could be here all night talking about this because, yeah, it is horrific. I mean, television pictures show us all. But so I fully support the motion. But I don't think the television pictures have shown enough of the pictures of normal Russian people on the streets. So it's not totally accepted even by his own country, and I just think that I take a lot from that. People being dragged around the streets of Moscow because it looks like a large proportion of his own people are not in agreement, and I think it would be fantastic if we could offer some sort of help to anybody incoming into Newport with open arms. God bless Ukraine.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Mr. Price, please.
Councillor Suller.
Councillor Suller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this motion. Martin Luther King had a dream. Sorry, it's very moving. That everybody would be equal in this world. But Putin is told lie after lie after lie. He wants world domination, but we won't let him. We shall beat him. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Suller. Mr. Price, next, please.
Yeah, Councillor Cochrane.
Councillor Cochrane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, totally support the motion. Who wouldn't? And I think it's really appalling of really what we have witnessed on telly, and without going into all what everybody else has said, it's the indiscriminate bombing of residential places. I just don't understand that, of flats and houses, and I just can't understand it. The point I want to make is I watched a program on YouTube today of ex-President Gorbachev, and I advise everybody to have a listen to that, what he was saying about Putin and all what was going on today, because he was a man really that changed really Russia in some respects, and it's very warming to listen to what he was saying about Putin and what was happening in Ukraine. So please watch it. It's on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Mr. Price next.
Councillor Truman.
Councillor Truman, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion, and as I say, we haven't got to look far back in history to look at these sort of despots. They've been around, haven't we? You know, you can name a load of them. You know, Stalin, Hitler, Saddam Hussein, loads of them, and they were all similar. You know, when a leader uses chemical weapons on their own people, you know, these sort of things. These are sort of things these people seem to they do, and history keeps throwing them up. But it's got to be stopped. And it's unfair, you know, a peace-loving country, a democratic country like Ukraine, have got to be treated like this. As you say, young children, civilians, nothing to do with any wars or argument, going about their normal daily business and being blown to pieces. That's not right. It can't be. In a free world, this has got to be stopped. How it's going to be stopped, probably none of us know how it's going to be. But we've got to use this voice today. And it might be a very small voice in the way of things, but it's got to be heard. The people of Ukraine should not have to put up with this, and to be threatened with nuclear weapons, that is deplorable. You know, when you just look at the, you know, Japan, they'll tell you all about nuclear weapons, what they had done to them. So as I say, to use that just about sums him up, doesn't it? But as I say, I go on, Mr. Mayor, but I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Mr. Price.
Councillor Jevons.
Councillor Jevons, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be very brief. We've all watched over the last few days of the invasion into Ukraine, but what turned my stomach was the alteration in movement of that tank to drive over the car. How sickening of an act is that, to frighten these people who have the right to live in peace and harmony, and they're scared. Now, we've never been scared like that. Only the people who have lived through wars have been scared like that. So please, I really need a solution to this. I don't know where it's coming from, but my heart goes out to those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Mr. Price.
Councillor Spencer.
Councillor Spencer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I just fully in support of this motion. I back up what everybody has said. I keep it brief. Yeah, full support for all Ukrainians and the citizens. Those that are still there, they must be terrified, and wish them all the best of luck for the future. And we stand with them in solidarity.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Mr. Price next.
Well, Councillor Suller has indicated again, it's not normal for someone to speak twice in the debate, but as you suspended standing orders anyway, I'm not sure whether you'd want to allow this on this occasion.
Of course I do. It's my last meeting, Mr. Price.
So in which case, Councillor Suller.
Thank you, Councillor Suller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make no apologies for my emotions, but Mr. Mayor, do you think we as a council could send a letter to the Russians in London and show how disgust of what we think are they doing to the people of Ukraine, and they're using cluster bombs, which is against international law? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That is an idea. If we want to send one, I'd certainly be prepared to sign that. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mr. Price. Anybody else now?
Yeah, Councillor Hussain.
Councillor Hussain, please. I think you're muted, Councillor Hussain. Still.
My headphones on, I think that's what it is.
There we are. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, without a doubt, I support this motion as well. And my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people and what they're going through at the moment. And I just feel that we have to support and do as much as we can. I know there's a lot of donation groups and things going on at the moment, and I definitely will be, taking part.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Price, is anybody else after Councillor?
Yes, Councillor Marshall.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, I'm in support of this motion, Mr. Mayor. My comments are mainly from someone that's been to Georgia, a twin city in Kutaisi, and I know we're speaking with a lot of those. They're basically asking what's next. So by all means, Putin must be stopped in this relation, and also anything that we can do, we should be doing. It's on our doorstep, but also we're world citizens at the end of the day. And if he doesn't stop now, when will he stop? So it's just those comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Mr. Price, is anybody after Councillor Marshall?
Yes, Councillor Horton.
Councillor Horton, please.
Hi, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I obviously support the motion as well. I employ a young Russian lady within my business, and she's experienced some kickback about what's going on being Russian. Obviously, she has no view on this other than the same as the rest of us, which is how despicable this whole action and activity is. I'm just wondering how we can support the Russian population that does live within our wards, and we can make sure that they are protected the way they should be. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think that is a very good point. Perhaps you could email Superintendent Townsend expressing your concerns and ask what plans they've got in place, because there are members of our society who are foolish enough to blame people that live in our city for problems that occur far away. So I think that would be a useful thing for you to do. Perhaps contact Superintendent Townsend and explain the position and see what can be done with it, at least to alert the police these things may be happening. Thank you. Mr. Price, anybody after Councillor Hall?
Councillor Cleverly.
Councillor Cleverly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this motion. My dad was in the Second World War and he was a prisoner of war for nearly 2 years. And he used to tell us when we were kids, he fought in that war to make sure there'd be no other wars coming up. But here we go. The scenes on TV is absolutely unbelievable. I feel really sorry for those children, everybody. You can't even make it up. Okay, I fully support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cleverly. Mr.
Councillor
Price?
John Guy.
John,
yes, I fully support this, Mr. Mayor. Just going back to a couple of days ago, there was a school teacher standing outside an apartment covered in blood. An apartment all blasted, nothing remained of it. And she said the day before she'd been teaching in a school and been to a supermarket. That's just a reality check of what's happened. I fully support this, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Mr. Price, next
Councillor
person.
Routley.
Councillor Routley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is heartrending to see this council, from no matter what position you were speaking, what political party or independent stance you take. But one thing's for sure, we are speaking with one heart, one voice, one direction, be it from the Senate in Wales to the unified Parliament in England, to Scotland, to Northern Ireland, to Europe. So many people are raising their voices in support of Ukraine and making a stance. This man has underestimated the will of the people right across Europe and the rest of the world. And there's something good has come out of something bad. We have unified each other and we've come together on one platform. God bless Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Routley. Mr. Price, anybody else?
Yeah, Councillor Fairweather.
Councillor Fairweather next, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It truly is a very difficult and horrible situation that we witness on the television every day. the news is absolutely full of it. Putin is, well, he's an evil, dangerous man, and a man that I think is trying to regain what was lost by the Soviet Union many, many years ago when Gorbachev was their leader. And I think what we have to be careful, what our leaders have to be careful of right across the world, is that if he is successful with Ukraine, where does he go next? Which is the next country to fall? Will it be Poland? You know, it's a very desperate situation out there. But I also understand why leaders across the world don't want to put forward that no-fly zone, because they don't want to escalate it into a third world war, because I think Putin's the type of guy that would do that, and he's just looking for an opportunity to use nuclear weapons on whoever. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Mr. Price and anybody else?
Yes, Councillor Watkins.
Councillor Watkins now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will make this as brief as possible. I absolutely share all the views that we've heard this evening. We are all human beings, and when we watch what is happening to our fellow human beings in Ukraine, well, it beggars belief. I absolutely share your emotions, Tom. Don't be afraid of showing them. I have watched the news and cried on more than one occasion since the 24th of February. We stand in solidarity with Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. Their bravery is humbling, to say the least. I hope and pray that this will come to an end as soon as is absolutely possible. And in the meantime, I do agree we do everything we can and must and will to support Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Mr. Price?
No one else has indicated, Mr. Mayor, so it's back to the leader to sum up.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Mogford.
Councillor Mogford is there, I think. Yes, Councillor Mogford.
I couldn't raise my hand, but I would just like to say something.
Yeah, of course you can, Ray.
Put my camera on. A lot of inspiring comments here. I think it was Baroness Wilcox who said about, Putin is watching us to see how our reactions are. That's why I think this motion is important, because we're showing what our reactions are, and they're all of the same ilk. Councillor Fairweather said about, we got to be careful on escalation, and it's a very, very fine balance, I think, in terms of what the West can do and how they can react. And it's up to our politicians across the Western world to do the right thing and to get the balance right. But appeasement shouldn't be something that we do for dictators and despots. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mogford, because we all know how well appeasement worked out the last time it was tried. Leader, if you'd like to sum up, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Evans for his support in seconding the motion, and all of our colleagues here this evening, Mr. Mayor, for their contributions to the debate. And I think the level of contribution really indicates the strength of feeling that we have here in Newport, and that we're actually expressing on behalf of our residents. And in listening to those contributions, Mr. Mayor, it did make me reflect on the day that we've had. And I fear I'm maybe about to go down the same road as Councillor Suller as I speak. So today, here in Wales, we visited 2 of our Newport schools. And we shared in the joy of those children, and it really was a joyous occasion, listening to those choirs sing. It was a very profoundly moving moment. Those children singing and so full of enthusiasm and excitement. And we had to pause and just consider at that time that it was such a joyous occasion, not just because we were celebrating something as momentous as the Jubilee, but also because the impact of COVID has meant that those children haven't been able to have those type of activities for quite some time, well, for almost 2 years, Mr. Mayor. So in reflection, I think of today and of those moments we've shared, it makes those images all the more distressing and all the more disturbing. Those images that we see every day that come into our homes. And it is so welcoming to hear our colleagues here this evening express such strong views in relation to this. What is happening is absolutely reprehensible. Here in Newport, our thoughts are with the citizens of the Ukraine and those Russian citizens who are completely opposed to this action by their government. As the leader of Newport City Council, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to also express on behalf of colleagues our support for those citizens who are already here in Newport. Our tremendous thanks to the Polish community for the efforts that they're undertaking and all those other communities, Eastern European communities. If there are people in Newport from the Ukraine or indeed our Russian citizens that need help and support, then I would really encourage them to come forward. We are here to support people. We will do everything that we can. Now tomorrow, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, there is a meeting. The 22 local authority leaders will be meeting with Welsh Government to discuss what further action we can take and what collective support we can give. Only this afternoon, our First Minister reiterated the support of Wales. Wales is a nation of sanctuary for the people of the Ukraine. I give you my word, colleagues, as the leader of Newport City Council, that on behalf of the citizens of Newport, I will offer our strength, our compassion and our support. And I thank you all for your contributions to the debate this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. It sums up, I'm sure what we all think. So, Mr. Price, we're going to vote on the motion now.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Right. So, I can't believe there are any amendments, as we know. But so we now please vote. If we can put the voting box up, please. Anybody found it yet? Oh, here we go. Thank you. Please vote. Okay. Yeah. Thank you all very much. That, unsurprisingly, that motion is carried. So now we move on to item 6. Notice of motion, cost of living. Councillor Hughes, you're going to introduce the item and formally move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And having presented the motion, I'd like to reserve my right to speak at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, this council recognises the unprecedented cost of living crisis facing many households across Newport, Wales and the UK. In the coming months, more and more households will see increases of a magnitude never seen before as the energy price cap is removed or energy deals come to an end. This comes on top of the cost of living crisis created by the impact of Brexit and the COVID pandemic, which has already seen unprecedented squeeze on people's incomes. Inflation remains at the highest level for over 30 years, which is putting a huge pressure on household budgets as earnings have not kept pace with prices, leaving family budgets squeezed and people worse off. The additional costs of the day-to-day living are already impacting negatively on every household across Newport, but even more so on families who are living close to the breadline, many of whom will need to visit food banks and will now be faced with terrible choices of heating their home or putting food on the table. The charity National Energy Action, NEA, has warned that a record 6 million UK households will be in fuel poverty when the next increase in the energy price cap comes into force in April. And this view is compounded by the findings of the Resolution Foundation think tank, which warned that millions of UK families face a year of squeeze in 2022. Thanks to rising energy bills, stagnant wages and tax rises, the Bank of England has also said it expects inflation to reach 6% by the spring. The Resolution Foundation have said that an increase in national insurance contributions from April, along with an expected rise in energy bills in the same month, could amount to a 1,200 hit to household finances, with low-income families forced to bear the brunt of these rises as they spend a greater proportion of their income on electricity and gas. As a council, we will continue to do everything within our power to help mitigate energy costs by signposting residents to a number of financial support options available. We have administered over 1.5 million to our eligible residents through the Winter Fuel Support Grant. We have also increased our support to food banks and related charities to £100,000. However, the help families need to deal with the cost of living crisis can only be fixed by decisive action by the UK government. This council therefore calls upon the leader of the council to write to the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer and call for the immediate implementation and action for the following: suspension of the proposed increase in national insurance contributions, a reduction in VAT for energy bills to help families and householders, and an introduction of new lower price cap on energy bills to protect households from excessive price rises. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. And this is to be seconded by the leader, I understand?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion. I'd like to reserve my right to speak, please.
Thank you, yes. So now, Mr. Price, colleagues are invited to speak on this motion.
Yeah, we're just waiting for the raised hand facility. In the meantime, if members wanted to indicate to you verbally whether they want to speak.
Yes, okay. Does who wants to start?
I'd like to speak, Mr. Mayor.
No, the chat box has come through now, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, hang on, the chat box is working now.
Right, so Councillor Harvey first.
Yeah, Councillor Harvey, and then Councillor Hourihan, I think. Thank you.
What the number of people, but Councillor Harvey first.
Councillor Harvey to begin then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this motion. There are times I wake up in the morning and I think, are we in 2022 or 1922? Because I cannot remember a time where we had to have as many food banks as we've got, where there are people working and using a food bank because they still can't afford the bills and they still can't afford to feed the family. It is horrifying. You get phone calls, could you come and visit? You go and visit and you say, look, what can we do? Can you find me a magic money tree because I'm drowning in debt? I can't afford to feed the kids. I can't afford not to work and I can't afford to work. There are no answers for that, Mr. Mayor, no answers whatsoever. It is appalling, it's horrific, and I feel we've gone back 100 years. It's absolutely horrendous. I really do feel for everybody in that situation, whether you're working or you're not working, you are all now in dire straits. And I just dread April coming round when we got a £700 a year increase on our energy bills, besides everything else. There's less coming in and twice as much going out, and something got to give. So I fully support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Is Councillor Hourihan next, Mr. Price?
No, it's Councillor Matthew Evans next.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Evans first and then on to Councillor Hourihan. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Councillor Hourihan has not indicated in the chat box yet, but we'll add his name to the list.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, yeah. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess we shouldn't have been surprised by this pre-election gimmick, which fails to recognise we've had a Welsh Labour government in charge since last century. If you were genuinely concerned, you could have called on the Welsh government to use their tax raising powers, particularly for low-income households, to offset some of the costs. But you didn't, so the Conservative group will not be taking part in this debate, which is solely designed to get a cheap headline. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. So, Mr. Price, I know I'm labouring this point. Is Councillor Hourihan next? Because he did seem to indicate.
Well, he's added his name to the bottom of the list, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Davis is next on the chat bar.
Okay, Councillor Horan, are you okay with that? I did try. Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, I agree with your ruling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis now, you said? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm certainly happy to support this motion. I absolutely believe this motion is the right thing to do, and it's the right thing for this administration to take forward. Inflation in December jumped to an astonished 5.4%, and this has been the highest rate since March 1992. And Bank of England are predicting this rate, this will actually peak at 6% this coming April. And some economists are suggesting this could rise further. Whilst most economies in the Western world are struggling with similar increases in the post-pandemic world that we're in, with
just to say, I'm going to be speaking next.
Sorry, Councillor Wilcox, I think you're.
Yeah, I'm speaking next.
Yeah, excuse me, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Davis is speaking.
I do beg your pardon. I'm just trying to tell everyone in my office to shut up.
Oh, that's
politely.
Fine. Yes, okay. Thank you. If you could just switch your microphone off, please. Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Okay, right, where was I? Okay, whilst most economies in the Western world are struggling with similar increases, in this post-pandemic world, world supply issues are having an impact. But this is particularly poignant and pertinent in the UK, where we're seeing the impact of Brexit. This is actually hitting us all, but the impact is being felt by far more devastatingly by those who are on a low income. It's already known that on average, the lowest income families proportionately actually spend twice as much on food and housing bills as those who are richest in our society. The additional impact of rising fuel costs that are currently the highest on record, and indeed are now set to increase further with the impact of the sanctions that we're seeing being placed on Russia that are yet to be seen. We do not know how high those costs are going to be, but we know they're rapidly rising. However, households are expecting to see their fuel bills go by 50% from April, taking total average cost of fuel bills to almost £2,000 a year. Again, our poorest households will have proportionally higher bills. Often their homes are already damp and poorly insulated. Many of our residents have already turned their heating off, and it's a stark choice for them between food or warmth. All this will be further exacerbated by the national government's intentions to increase national insurance contributions in April, a tax burden that many cannot afford. Experts are clear that there are fairer ways of increasing taxes. Finally, it is clear that wages are stagnating, and economists are warning that average weekly earnings after tax will fall in real terms in 2022. Economists believe that the average pay is expected to shrink in this coming year. The Institute of Fiscal Studies expects that the average worker will be almost £13,000 a year worse off by the middle of the 2020s. Our residents in Newport are already struggling, and this is clearly going to worsen in the coming months and years. And as a local authority, we have a moral imperative to support our residents, enabling access to help and support. Being fair and proportionate and promoting equality in all circumstances is fundamental to what we do, and as a Labour administration, we will ensure this continues. As the Cabinet Member for Education, I'm well aware that families already turn to schools for help and support. Schools are now the hubs of local communities, providing access to food and clothing. Children are coming to school hungry, and this is not about poor parenting. This is about struggling to pay bills. This is about survival. The impact of well-being, both mental and physical, is being seen across our city. And this is one of the reasons why we're investing an additional £8.1 million into education. We accept our responsibility in taking a holistic approach to learning, support for well-being. The support needed by parents is fundamental, ensuring our children have access to education in order to raise aspiration expectations, and importantly, not to be given opportunities that their circumstances not necessarily allow. I support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Mr. Price next.
Councillor Wilcox, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah, thank you, and apologies for leaving the microphone on earlier. Mr. Mayor, the cost of living crisis is about steep price increases in everyday and essential food items, and making the situation worse for the 4.7 million adults and 2.5 million children already living in food insecurity. The UK government is making this crisis worse through tax hikes, low growth, falling real wages, and a failure to tackle the energy crisis. And with over a decade of Conservative-led UK governments, for leaving Britain uniquely exposed to a global gas crisis and failing to create high-paid secure jobs. You see, the darkness of poverty is not just about being able to turn the lights on. It's been about being driven into debt and despair because you can't afford to live. And not just at night time. It's during the day when the curtains are closed because you're fearful of the debt collector knocking on the door. That's the darkness of poverty. I grew up with it during my childhood when my dear late mother, as a single parent, did whatever she could to keep us from that inexorable slide into total despair. And I've spent a lifetime since in public service trying to ease poverty for others and to try and prevent it. But the UK government's course of action leaves us with a cost of living crisis on food, on energy and goods, the universal credit cut, cutting the income of 6 million families, and finally, putting up taxes on working people and businesses, leaving us with the biggest tax burden for 70 years. The Welsh Labour government, in collaboration with local government, is of course doing all it can to ameliorate the worst effects of these price rises for Newport. But I'd like to remind the Leader of the Opposition that the blame lies firmly at the door of Westminster and the keys to the Treasury, where the public purse is kept. So despite what Welsh Government can do, the money is in Whitehall and our residents need to be reminded of this fact. I fully support this motion.
Thank you, Baroness Wilcox. Mr. Price, next, please.
Councillor Truman.
Councillor Truman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd never ever thought we'd be sat here in 2022 discussing the poverty levels that we see in this day and age. As you know, there's again history over the years. We've been poverty levels in the Bucks Valleys, the north, all over the place. Mining communities, left, right, and centre. And I've done a fair bit of reading, like other people, and I've read, one of the books that really stood out for me was the Road to Wigan Pier, George Orwell. He was commissioned to go up into the Wigan area around there, a lot of mining area and things like that, and look at the hardship and what people were living under. And we're hearing information now and reading in all sorts of papers and things, but it's a lot of facts now that people know are in real hardship, as they say, not seen since the 30s in some cases, but to think here we are now. Now, Matthew said this is a gimmick. It's not a gimmick, it's a motion. It's a motion about trying to do something for millions of people now living in hardship. That's what it's all about. And as I say, the food banks are bulging. They can't cope at the moment with it. They're doing the best they can, and they will do. But these heating fuel bills, these sort of things, taxation going up, national insurance going up. As I say, all this you can lay at the door at austerity, 11 years of austerity. But people are suffering like they've never suffered before. And I thought, personally, the Tories should support this motion because it's not a gimmick. It's a serious motion about something that's affecting everybody. You know, in my ward alone, soon to be my ex-ward, I'm retiring, as you know, but recently the number of complaints and the hardship we've seen, unbelievable. It's going to get worse, not better. But as I say, as far as I'm concerned, this motion is a serious issue. It's not a gimmick. It's a serious issue, trying to highlight the situation, how we feel in the city of Newport on behalf of our residents. Forget the political links. All of us, we're here to get the best for our people, and we're trying to improve their lives. And this is doing exactly that. I support the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Mr. Price, next, please.
Yeah, the very patient Councillor Horain, Mr. Mayor.
Well done. Thank you very much, Councillor Horain.
Thank you, Mr. Price. I'm not normally described as patient, but thank you, Mr. Mayor, for seeing me now. And again, thanks to Councillor Matthew Evans for opening up this debate. A lot of the things I'm going to say now, I had intended to say when the Conservatives obviously will oppose the budget settlement for this year. I had a leaflet pushed through my door with a Conservative imprint on it saying they were promising inflation-proof lower council tax. Now, how can you get a lower council tax than 2.4% in this present climate? We have a CPI of 5.5%, and of course I must comment that the CPI was something just invented by the Tory government of the time to keep down public sector pensions. We actually have an RPI of 7.4% if we are to believe what they published today to justify how much the rail fares are going up, which is absolute extortion. And I actually, strange enough, had my pension drop through the door today, which tells me I'm going to get the princely sum of 3.5% on my pension. And most of my colleagues in the older age are just going to have to suck up 2.5% or 4.5%, depending on the way you look at it. Now, Councillor Harvey talked about us going back 100 years. I wish we were only going back 100 years. We're probably going back to Dickensian times, or maybe even further back than that, maybe 1847, when, you know, for the rest of my colleagues on the council, they may have wished that I'd stayed in Ireland, but 1847, when they starved the Irish out now, and we're all over Britain, we're all over everywhere, but we're having draconian costs put upon us, and goodness knows where we'll be by next June, September, whatever. And somebody talked about the fuel prices. I think it was Councillor Davis talked about the fuel prices going up to £2,000 for the average household. I would just say if we are lucky, because what's happened recently has caused the fuel prices to probably double, and probably £2,500 is near the mark. But again, I do thank Councillor Evans for opening up this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurain. Mr. Price, next, please.
Councillor Cochrane.
Councillor Cochrane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly going to support the motion. Members remember going back quite a few councils. I raised the issue in supermarkets where, going back quite a few years ago, there was baskets there on the exit of a supermarket where people were putting dog food and cat food in for people. If you look at it now, there's large baskets there for food for the food banks. And that's how things have changed. And there's been more millionaires and billionaires created during this period whilst the Conservatives have been in power than ever before. Now, I'm going to come from a different angle on this, while supporting all the positive views already expressed. I'm coming from the view of, as a council, we have children's homes, residential homes, schools, community centres, need I go on? All these needs are going to be an added cost to the authority. So in future years, where are we going to find these finances? Also, the independent sector of residential homes will clearly have to put some of their rates up, and that's going to be possibly a cost to us. And those who self-finance in residential homes, they will feel the burden. And where's the money going to come from? They're going to clearly have to come back to us, because once the finance for the individual sector, they will run out of money, and they will be coming to us then to finance the people in those residential homes. So it's a cost for the individuals, but let's be clear, it's going to be a big cost to the local authorities as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Mr. Price, next, please.
No one else has indicated to speak, Mr. Mayor, so it's back to the leader first and then Councillor Hughes.
Leader first and Councillor Hughes, is that okay with you two? Yep. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Hughes for proposing the motion and for colleagues speaking in support of this evening. I'd like to make a really important point in relation to the discussion that we're having this evening. And that point Councillor Cochrane started to make, and that is this is not just about how it affects individuals and households, but it's also the impact of the national insurance increase and the energy cost increase on both service providers and businesses as well. And we've already heard this evening about the potential stagnation of wages. Well, there's the potential for this to stagnate the economy at a time when it could not be more important that we get the economy going again. It's about the impact on the economy, the impact on society, and the impact, Mr. Mayor, on well-being. We know that 17,000 Newport households saw their universal credit cut by over £1,000. The impact on those families, on those households, is huge. Here in Wales, the Welsh Labour government are attempting to ameliorate this situation by offering all households in council tax bands A to D a £150 payment, £150 that does not need to be repaid. I'm really proud to be here in Wales, and I am proud to join colleagues this evening in supporting this motion and really emphasising to our residents that we are listening and we do understand what they're going through, and we will do everything that we can to try and help to support them at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Hughes, do you wish to sum up now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really disappointed, to be honest, that the Leader of the Opposition sees the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, as a gimmick, when the reality is that so many of our families in Newport are struggling. These are Newport families.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I merely said it's an election gimmick from your side. Thank you.
Stand and say that it's an election gimmick. These are Newport families in every ward. It's not a gimmick in any context to ask our Prime Minister, who leads this country, to protect households from excessive price rises. Price rises that have been caused in the main by Westminster policies. And these are Tory policies. The removal of a £20 uplift to universal credit wasn't a gimmick. When 62% of our people are experiencing higher energy bills, that's not a gimmick. When the Tory government removed the cap on energy bills and increased VAT, those weren't gimmicks. These were about government policies about who had forgotten about its people. And that's okay with people using food banks, is it, when children and their families are increasingly falling into poverty in their hundreds of thousands. We are politicians, so I think it's right that we ask these questions of central government. I feel horrified and saddened that as a trustee of a local food bank, asking the Westminster government to think again about policies that I see every day are causing hardship to people in our city, that is not a gimmick. This wasn't a gimmick, it was a plea to government in Westminster to try and understand the impact of their policies on ordinary people, an impact I see daily being forced on my neighbours, on my friends, on my residents, by the increasing amount of people using our city food banks. Tell them that this is a gimmick in any context. It's only a gimmick if your eyes are closed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So, Mr. Price, we now vote on the motion.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Could we have the voting box up, please? Thank you. That motion is now carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues.
So we now move on to item 7, which is the National Non-Domestic Rates Discretionary Rate Relief Scheme. The Leader to present this report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report needs to be considered in relation to a number of reports that we're looking at today, and this concerns the non-domestic rates paid by businesses in Newport, particularly in the city centre. The report that we have here is asking us to consider adopting two schemes. Firstly, the Welsh Government's Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Rate Relief Scheme, which is the first part of the report, and also, and this is really important, a new Newport City Centre local rate relief scheme, which forms the second part of the report. Firstly, Mr Mayor, turning to the Welsh Government scheme, members will be aware that over the last 2 years, the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors have been supported in many ways. And this has included relief from paying business rates, with the council administering this at the local level. The scheme outlined within this report is a continuation for 2022-23 of previous arrangements, but at a reduced maximum rates relief of 50% to qualifying businesses across the city. It is fully and which recognises that support is still required for this sector as they now attempt to recover from the impacts of the pandemic over the last 2 years. Secondly, our local city centre scheme. Now, the Newport City Centre local rate relief scheme is completely new and it's unique to the city centre. I'm delighted to be able to announce it here today. It represents a significant investment and a focus on our businesses in the city centre and illustrates how we propose to help them recover after the last 2 years. Now, whilst the National Welsh Government funded scheme is welcomed and will provide much needed rate relief to those in the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors, we recognise that this scheme alone will not be sufficient to address the problems faced by the Newport City Centre. Our innovative scheme is therefore designed to assist existing businesses to remain viable post-COVID and to incentivise new businesses to open in city centre retail units. It builds on the national scheme. Now, Newport is not alone in having a number of empty shops in the city centre. However, the number of empty shops in Newport is high. It's also important that existing viable businesses are supported, especially after the economic shock of the pandemic. If adopted, the Newport City Centre local rate relief scheme will see eligible businesses in the retail, leisure and hospitality sector receive 25% of the full rates payable in the form of a reduction on their rate bill. So what this means is that those businesses that are eligible to receive the Welsh Government relief will also receive the Newport City Centre local rate relief, further reducing their bill. And in most cases, they will only have to pay 25% of the rates in 2022-23. It's proposed that the scheme will run for a second year and eligible businesses will then, assuming no further national scheme is in place, have 25% business rate relief. It's anticipated, Mr Mayor, that this Newport City Centre rate relief will make the centre of Newport a more attractive proposition to new businesses, whilst also assisting existing businesses to overcome the COVID pandemic and remain viable. The report details those businesses that will be eligible, and we predict that it will assist up to approximately 160 businesses in the city centre. The scheme's been carefully designed so that it's targeted at the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors, as they've been particularly affected by the COVID pandemic. The scheme can be easily understood by businesses, and administration for the council will be straightforward, as the scheme replicates much of the Welsh Government's national scheme in terms of eligibility. Focusing on the city centre provides significant benefits for all residents from this investment, due to anticipated employment opportunities and a better experience of the city centre. Is specifically aimed at reducing the current number of vacant premises in conjunction with other existing economic development grants. Now, by limiting the rate to 25% and applying the scheme to properties with rateable values at or under £50,000, it enables the scheme to operate for 2 years. thus allowing sufficient time for recovery in the sector, balancing this with the cost of any scheme. Colleagues, it is required that Council needs to agree the resolution which is included in the report. I hope that you'll agree that it represents a significant opportunity to support business, our city and our residents through a carefully targeted scheme to help existing businesses to recover and also to encourage new businesses into our city centre. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jevons. So now, are there any comments on the proposal? Mr. Price, anybody in the chat box indicate they wish to speak?
Not at the moment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. You haven't got long if you wish to comment on it. That was a very thorough explanation of it, Leader. As I said, it's at this time we missed Councillor Langsford. Thank you. So if there aren't any comments on it, we will now move.
Councillor Horton, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Horton, yes. Councillor Horton, please.
Yeah, it's just more of a question. Do I need to declare an interest as my business falls within this scheme?
No, Mr. Mayor, it's a general application, so there's no personal interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move to the vote then, please.
Does Councillor Jevons wish to speak as the seconder first?
So sorry, Councillor Jevons, do you wish to speak?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Okay, if we can find the voting box, we'll now vote on it. Thank you. It's up before us, I think, now. So members, please vote. Okay. So that motion is carried, if that's the correct expression. Item 7 is carried. Item 8 now, please, Leader. You present this report again, please. Are you muted at the moment? I think.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm still going from my original sheet, which has the original numbering on it. So the next item then, Mr. Mayor, is discretionary rate relief for charities and similar organisations. And this report sets out some changes to our existing discretionary rate relief policy that mainly affects charities that occupy premises in the city. Now, the current discretionary rate relief policy requires updating to take account of changes to business rates for smaller properties and to broaden the scope of the rate relief awarded so that more eligible organisations can benefit from full rate relief. Now, in particular, those local charities and organisations connected to children and young people and those that directly support the work of the council. Although it's provided a framework to assess applications since coming into effect in 2016, the current discretionary rate relief policy has highlighted sorry, Mr. Mayor, has highlighted some anomalies in the way.
Goodness, Leader, I think I've never had anybody get so emotional about discretionary relief for charities and similar organisations.
I'm sorry, I think something's caught in my throat, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, goodness.
I apologise.
Do you want it? I know, seriously, you want to take a minute and we okay? Glass of water and all that?
Thank you. I do apologise, Mr. Mayor. I think something was caught in my throat. So, going back to the introduction to the report. So, although we've previously provided a framework to assess applications since coming into effect in 2016, the current discretionary rate relief policy has highlighted some anomalies in the way that some organisations are treated. And that's why it's really important that we amend it. So charities are liable for 20% rates when a normal ratepayer in the same building would pay no rates due to small business rate relief. And some charitable ratepayers that are not commercial in nature, for example, the Scouts, are having to find considerable sums to pay that 20% rate bill that's currently payable. The significant contribution of organisations that directly assist the council in pursuing its objectives are also not recognised within the current policy, and the changes to the policy outlined in this report, if adopted, will resolve these issues, and that it will enable charities that directly benefit our city's residents to receive full rate relief. Now, as the report indicates, many of these charities, such as the Scouts, the Guides and community youth clubs, have a positive impact on our young people and their families, and on the wider communities that they operate within. I'm really pleased to say that our policy now reflects the contribution such organisations make, and that we are now going to support them financially in carrying forward the good work that they do. This new policy is a positive move forward in supporting the citizens of Newport and our communities across the city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. And do you wish to speak to the motion now or later in the debate if you wish to speak at all?
Related if I wish to speak. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now, does any member wish to propose an amendment? No, I think we're okay on that. So are there now any comments on this proposal, please?
Councillor Marshall, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm going to be the same as Councillor Horton, but as members are aware, I'm heavily involved in the organisation of St John Ambulance, or St John Ambulance Cymru. Although I think it's blanket, I just wanted to declare an interest if I have to. Thank you.
That's fine, Councillor Marshall. Yeah. So, anybody else wish to speak about this, please? No, nobody, Mr. Price?
No, no one else has indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry,
Councillor Rain.
Mayor, I can't seem to get the thing to rise, but I must declare an interest because the council has appointed me to GAVO, wonderful organisation, and they're probably a little bit more diverse than just within the city. So can I ask if they'll be exempt from rates as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader. So, Councillor Horan, they are obviously in other areas as well as in other premises in other areas as well as in Newport, aren't they? Because that's Gwent Association of Voluntary Organisations, so they must be elsewhere as well. Leader, can you shed any light on this, please?
Perhaps the head of finance could provide a response to that question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leader.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Leader. So I've got we're all passing the kind of thing over here. I've got Emma Johnson on the call here, who's our revenues manager. So I will ask Emma if she can provide any help here. We may need to think about how GAVO would sit under this. The policy is a framework as opposed to a detailed list of instructions, I suppose. So therefore, there will be scope for us to use it in a flexible way because it is only a framework. So I don't know if Emma has got anything else to add to those comments.
Mr. Mayor, it may be more appropriate if we provide a written response to Councillor Horan, but as Head of Finance was saying, they really need to make an application and it needs to be assessed against the criteria. So it's probably unfair to give an answer in council today in terms of whether GAVO would be eligible.
I think that would be a good idea, Mr. Price, really, because what we don't want to do is to give any hostages to fortune with this. Say something that we either can't deliver on then or to deliver on or something like that. So if that's okay with Marion and Emma, that'd be fine. Okay? Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Rushford. And I look forward to getting an email from you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So now we have to vote. Councillor Jevons, do you wish to say anything now? You okay with that? I think you said that, didn't you? So can we now move on to the vote then, Mr. Price?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll send that the voting box to now.
Thank you. Can members now vote, please? Okay, that's done, that's carried. So item 9 now, please, Leader. 2022-23 Capital Strategy and Treasury. Leader to present the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the next item relates to the annual capital and treasury management strategies, which are brought to this council meeting, having been reviewed and commented upon by Governance and Audit Committee at their meeting, which took place on the 27th of January. And Cabinet also endorsed both of these strategies at the meeting of the 18th of February and have approved the detailed capital programme. As full council, we're required to approve both strategies and the prudential indicators and limits contained within them. For reference, the comments from the Governance and Audit Committee are included within this report, as are the responses to the specific points raised. So there's 2 strategies before you today, which are a requirement of SIPFA's Prudential Code, form part of a critical short, medium and long-term planning financial planning, and are intrinsically linked with our budget setting process. So the purpose of the capital strategy is to set out the council's approach to decision making regarding capital expenditure, and in the process demonstrating that those decisions are made in line with service objectives while giving consideration to risk, reward and impact. The capital strategy is inherently linked with the Treasury management strategy itself, and that's concerned with the council's approach to managing its cash, including primarily the approach to borrowing and investing activities. A key aspect of the Treasury management strategy is the borrowing limits to be approved today, which form part of the suite of prudential indicators which govern the council's cash management activities. Now, the capital strategy is a long-term focused document which considers the next 10 years as a minimum. And because of this long-term focus, it's absolutely critical that decisions made are reflective of the need for capital plans to be affordable. So capital spend plans can be accommodated within future and current forecasted funding levels. Prudent capital spend plans are proportionate, and the borrowing limits are reflective of the likely levels of borrowing required, not the worst case scenario. Sustainable, it's essential that when considering both affordability and prudence, sustainability is at the heart of those considerations. Now, essentially, this means the following: that debt-funded capital expenditure incurred today will result in a long-term commitment upon the council to repay that borrowing and the interest that arises from it. That commitment to meet capital financing costs will form part of the revenue budget. Whilst that commitment might be affordable now, it has to be possible to maintain this over the long term. Capital financing costs, once locked in, cannot be reduced or avoided, meaning that any future budgetary challenges will impact upon the level of funding available for other services and priorities, rather than the capital financing budget. Now, due to the importance of these factors, colleagues, the Head of Finance's commentary within the report specifically addresses these. As outlined at the beginning, whilst Cabinet makes decisions regarding the projects that comprise the capital programme, it is the full council that determines the borrowing limits which must be adhered to. Whilst many projects are funded from sources such as grants, capital receipts and specific reserves, there will be a number that cannot be funded in this way and are ultimately funded via borrowing. The overall capital programme, therefore, needs to be set within these borrowing limits. So our capital programme for the forthcoming financial year 22-23 represents the last year of the current 5-year capital programme. However, 2 years have been added to the programme to reflect those projects which start in this current programme but extend beyond it to completion. It's a large and challenging programme to deliver, with the programme standing at 288.4 million in totality and in excess of 100 million in 2022-23 alone. It includes a number of our key capital priorities, as well as investments such as borrowing for the Cardiff Capital Region City deal and an element of borrowing headroom to allow flexibility for new schemes or additional costs to be funded. Some of our larger schemes in the programme include £111.7 million in relation to education in schools, of which 75 million is included in relation to our 21st Century Schools Band B and Band B plans, which will see a significant improvement in the quality of our school buildings. Over £25 million of funding for the Cardiff Capital Region City deal, which will contribute towards a huge level of economic development across the region, including the benefit to Newport. Nearly £10 million for our new footbridge at Newport Station. Over £12 million in relation to a refurbishment and restoration of the Transporter Bridge, and £19.7 million for the new leisure centre, which in turn will pave the way for the new Colleague Gwent development, forming part of our Newport Knowledge Quarter. Of the 288.4 total programme, approximately 92 million of the expenditure is to be funded via debt, thus increasing the need to borrow and resulting in the council committing to being a net borrower over the medium to long term. And this commitment to being a net borrower is reflected in Table 2 of our report, which shows the anticipated level of growth of the cumulative level of borrowing, with actual borrowing anticipated to increase from the current level of 149 million to an anticipated peak of 203 million by 2023-24, based on the delivery of the current programme as set out in the report. The borrowing can either take the form of actual external borrowing or can be managed via the use of existing cash resources, which is known as internal borrowing. The Council has historically been successful at maximising its internal borrowing capacity, which in turn reduces the need to incur the costs associated with external borrowing. As reflected in the outlook contained within this report, the level of internal borrowing represented by the level of cashback reserves held is expected to be around £100 million heading into 2022-23. In essence, this means that this is the historic value of debt-funded capital expenditure, which has been funded via internal borrowing. However, the capacity for internal borrowing is now diminishing as earmarked reserves are utilised, and as a consequence of this, the need to externally borrow will increase to, in effect, fund this historic expenditure. Then, in addition to any future capital programme, either in the existing programme or the future programme, will lead to a requirement to undertake further borrowing and will add to the overall capital financing requirement. And this really serves to remind us why decisions need to be taken into consideration affordability, prudence and sustainability. So development of a new capital programme from 2023-24 will potentially see the need to borrow grow further, and it will be important that the costs arising from further borrowing can be met from within the revenue budget. Within Newport, as we're already aware, the proportion of the revenue budget dedicated to capital financing costs is already relatively high compared to Welsh councils, and so it's important that any new programme doesn't disproportionately impact upon this, and that is sustainable going forward. Turning to our Treasury management strategy, this is primarily concerned with the Council's approach to borrowing and investing, and also includes a number of key prudential indicators. In terms of borrowing, as we've already discussed, the Council is committed to being a net borrower. And whilst we've already discussed the changes that may take place, although the Council will defer its need to borrow for as long as possible, it may consider borrowing early to take advantage of favourable interest rates, but this sort of action would only be taken in conjunction with advice from our Treasury advisors. In terms of investing, the objective when investing funds is to strike an appropriate balance between risk and return, and that's minimising the risk of incurring losses from defaults and the risk of receiving unsuitably low investment income. Now, as outlined in last year's strategy, the Council intends to diversify its investments into different asset classes to maximise returns, whilst mitigating against the risk and low yields from short-term unsecured bank investments. This change in approach was placed on hold due to the uncertain economic climate caused by the pandemic. However, the intention is to explore this further during 2022-23. So, Mr. Mayor, I commend these strategies to colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, second, Mr. Mayor.
Busy night tonight, Councillor Jevons. Are there any comments on the report, please? No. So if there aren't any comments, can we? Will now councillors please vote? Okay, that is carried. So now item. Leader again, please. Item 10, revenue final budget and medium-term financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, colleagues. We now have the council tax report for 2022-23. It's an integral part of the council's budget setting processes, as my administration's budget for 2022-23 requires the increase we indicated in our February cabinet meeting, which was 2.4%. Now, just to remind everybody, as the administration, the cabinet make the decisions on the allocation of resources, and full council then makes the final decision on the council tax level only. We're here this evening to agree the council tax for 2022-23, and via this, the council's total net budget for that year too. Now, before we discuss the council tax level that's being recommended to council today, I'd like to first turn our attention to the budget itself. Our proposed budget builds on this year's current budget and how we invested our underspend from 2020-21. It's also mindful and demonstrates synergy with the support the Welsh Government has given to businesses and communities over the last 2 years. We've identified a number of key priority areas to receive significant investment as we recover from the last 2 years, and they include the following areas of activity. We will invest over £8 million in schools and over £6.5 million in social care, with a focus here on prevention and early intervention services. This includes budgeting for the payment of the real living wage to care workers. When we clapped for our care workers, we meant it. We need to support our communities, families and young people, and this investment protects and enhances our ability to do that in a timely fashion. Our budget also provides for investment in our housing and homelessness services. This will enable us to continue the really good work we've done on supporting our vulnerable citizens who need this support with housing, and will provide capacity to move towards our ambition of net zero carbon. And we're also going to provide a further support for our city centre, investing almost £500,000 over the next 2 years to promote the city, encourage tourism, provide capacity to coordinate the councils and our partners' work within the centre, and improve the environment in and around the city with more cleansing capacity. I'll also touch on the further support to city centre businesses shortly. We're focusing on our green spaces, providing greater levels of investment in these important areas. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on people's lives. Being outdoors and spending time in green space has been shown to be highly beneficial, both to mental and physical well-being. It's the Cabinet's intention that this investment in parks and outdoor spaces will encourage residents and families to connect further with the natural environment and within their local communities. Now, the Cabinet have also considered the alignment of permanent budgets set out within this report with one-off funding that will be available from this year's underspend, and how this can be used to further enhance the Cabinet's offering. So in addition to the permanent funding in the city's parks and open spaces, a further £2.5 million one-off investment in these areas will be funded from the revenue underspend at the end of the year. This will improve access in our cemeteries and provide capacity to invest in our play areas across the city. In relation to those play areas, we will ensure that we undertake this investment in conjunction with the local residents who use these spaces, so that we prioritise the things that matter most to our residents. In addition, as I've outlined in my previous reports, we will invest nearly £1 million in supporting existing retail, leisure and hospitality businesses in the city centre, as well as encourage more businesses to take up our empty premises. We will do this to provide support to those businesses recovering from the last 2 years, as well as offering support to new businesses coming into the city centre. So colleagues, this budget builds on last year's programme, where we invested in our businesses and communities, with more investment in business, the city centre and our green spaces. It's also aligned with and builds upon activity prioritised by Welsh Government. At this stage, I'd like to give my thanks to all our residents, partners and stakeholders who've taken the time to respond to the consultation. We've listened to what you've told us about our plans, and our priorities are your priorities. We're prioritising people and investing in place. Our focus is on community wealth building, building on the strengths of our communities and delivering a green and just recovery for all. We have listened. I'd like now to turn our attention to the recommended council tax increase. As I announced at the February Cabinet meeting, we've recommended a reduced 2.4% increase. I made clear our intention to listen to our residents and be mindful of the continued pressures on household finances. My administration appreciates the tough times people are facing and the uncertainty that still exists. Before a decision is made on the level of council tax that's being proposed today, I'd like to make the following points. I think when discussing council tax, people have a tendency to focus on the percentage increase and to use this as a comparison with relative increases in other local authority areas. Now, I understand this, but this is the budget and the absolute values, the monetary values, are of great importance here. Now, in this respect, Newport continues to have one of the lowest council tax increases in Wales, and the monetary values our percentage increase generates is less than the value that it would generate in nearly all other councils in Wales. So let me explain. The monetary value our 2.4% generates equates to £2.48 a month for a Band D property. To generate an equivalent amount, almost 2/3 of Welsh councils would need to increase council tax by only 2.1% and less. It's really important to understand that. Most of our properties here in Newport are bands A to C, and a 2.4% increase will increase monthly bills by £1.66, £1.93 and £2.21 respectively. We do need to consider this. They are increases, but they're modest increases. And I'm pleased that we've been able to deliver the modest increases. But we need to consider that in terms of our budgetary requirements as well. And the total monetary value the increase generates is needed for our budget, which we will invest carefully in the areas of our services that support families and the development of our city. And it's also really important to note within this that our Welsh Labour government has announced a payment of £150 per household for those households in bands A to D, which doesn't have to be repaid. Newport's tax levy is one of the lowest in Wales and the UK for comparable councils, and a 2.4% recommended increase will maintain that. The rate we're proposing here is not dissimilar to other increases across Wales. Now, for at least the past 12 years, our position has been consistent, as we have remained in the position of second or third of the lowest council tax levels in Wales. During this period, we've also implemented a substantial package of savings and efficiencies. particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, in order to ensure that we achieve that. And whilst we've seen and continue to see a number of financial pressures over the medium term, I am very pleased that we've managed to respond to the concerns raised by our residents and reduce the council tax increases accordingly. Colleagues, this is a good budget that seeks to invest in the right priorities as we look beyond the challenges of the last 2 years. We will use these priorities to guide our work, to deal with the new challenges, but also the new opportunities in the future. I commend the budget and the modest level of council tax increase required and ask that you support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. So are there any comments on the report now, please? I'll rely on you, Mr. Price, to tell me if people wish to speak.
Councillor Matthew Evans has indicated first, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, while we know this budget is a pre-election giveaway full of early Christmas presents, we are a responsible opposition party and there are many elements to be applauded. The Conservative group will support it and hopefully you will recognise the extremely generous settlement the UK government gave the Welsh government to enable this to happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Evans. Any other comments? Mr. Price, who's...
Councillor Whitehead is next, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Whitehead next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think in my 10 years I've ever attended such a politicised meeting, to be honest with you. But there you are, we're 8 weeks from an election or something, aren't we? Yeah, the budget. In fairness, as I've said in previous meetings, it's always easier to shout onto the field of play when you're not the manager of the football team. It's actually a good budget. There's lots to like about it. Nice to see a standout such as £420,000 to the homeless. The care support prevention services, 6.5 million. 8 million schools is fantastic. We know that we are behind in Wales nationally, so there's a lot to like about that in particular. And the city cash, the boost, it's good. Again, looking through the park spaces and stuff, dare I say it, 2.5 million on that. Dare I say that's an election sweetener, and I can't help never being honest, which I am. But you have to remember this, increases, residents, I think we underestimate them. They're not just the shouters that say you're going to give us a council tax increase. They don't shout it for the sake of it. I think when we get the basics right, local authorities, they'll be warmly greeted, you know, like the cemeteries, the basics, the street cleaning, things like that. So it's always easier to sell a rise like 2.4% when these things are always on top of, rather than around, let's say, for example, election time or whatnot. And cemeteries, you know, they shouldn't resemble jungles. I swear I bumped into Attenborough the other week at Christchurch. But so, yeah, overall for me, I will be supporting this budget. There will still be some hardliners out there lamenting the 2.4, but as the leader quite rightly says, it is a low rise. Maybe it is an election budget. I don't know, but it doesn't matter in the main because it is a good budget and I commend it and I shall support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Next, please, Mr. Price.
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the Cabinet with responsibility for education, I feel it's completely right that we look to school budgets and services and we agree to invest an additional 8.1 million into the education budget. And important, this includes funding where we recognise the vulnerability of our children in Newport, and that is across the city with those who are still coping with the impact of the pandemic. I completely support the proposed council tax rise of 2.44% and we're voting for this. It is below inflation, busting, I believe, but importantly, it is a recognition that so many of our residents are facing increased costs that are having an impact on their daily lives with the rising cost of food and fuel bills and cost of those which we've previously referred to. But I think it's also important to remind our residents that are entitled to apply for a council tax discounts and reductions if they're on a low income, they live alone, they are students or carers or care leavers or have a disability. And it's important that residents are made aware of this, and it's important that they apply for this entitlement because it's through Welsh Government funding that this is available for them within this authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Mr Price, next person, please.
Councillor Carmel Townsend.
Councillor Carmel Townsend, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you. The Liberal Democrats on Newport Council recognise the positive news in the budget for schools and social services and are pleased to support this part of the budget entirely, especially in light of Councillor Hughes's motion earlier. In terms of the budget, we want the council to meet additional resident priorities that are not met elsewhere in the budget. We are proposing an immediate 5.1% solidarity cut to councillors' income at all levels. This matches estimated cost of living increases faced by all our residents. It rules sorry, I can't read that. It shows that we commit as a council to voluntarily hand this 5.1% back as individuals. This would save £59,000 a year. The council ensures that funding is found for the second waste recycling centre as a matter of urgency, so that any new administration can push forward without waiting for funding from Welsh Government. An allocation of funding should be made available in the next administration to enable CCTV to be installed in troubled hotspots, and a fund set up so that individual households can apply for part funding of their own CCTV. As a matter of urgency, the council should ensure that it extricates itself from a situation where it is paying for empty shops in the city centre, which is costing £500,000 a year. Newport residents have told us time and again that their priorities are cleaner streets, they want to feel safer, they want action taken on antisocial behaviour, and they want a thriving city centre. These are practical, pragmatic and positive proposals, and I hope that members across the political divide will support them. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. So, just to be clear, you are proposing an amendment to the budget? Is that
no? That's not an amendment.
It's not an amendment.
Okay, so what would you be? What? Could you explain what you want us to do with that? That's what I'm trying to say.
They're just comments, Mr Mayor. As I understand it, Councillor Townsend is not proposing an amendment to the council tax resolution or rate or the base budget. These are comments made to the new cabinet, probably post May, in terms of how that money is spent. So we'll record that in a minute.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Hourihane has popped up again. Is he the next one on the list, Mr Price?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hourihane, your go now. Again, please.
And thank you, Mr Mayor. As always, I'm very grateful to you for hearing me. I believe Councillor Evans' comments are churlish, if I'm being kind, and Councillor Townsend's comments are irrelevant. I've already stated the percentages that we are talking about, and this is an extremely beneficial budget to the ratepayers or council taxpayers of Newport. 2.4% is vastly under RPI or CPI or whatever measure you wish to use, and I do commend this budget to everybody. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hourihane. Mr Price next.
Yeah, Councillor Watkins, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on the issue of the monies that are to go into Newport City schools. I think it's worth mentioning that a goodly number of these schools are actually in the red in terms of budget because they've been inadequately funded previously. I would also hope that some of these monies will go to improve the learning environment in some of the schools, particularly Killeen Comprehensive, where the learning environment is dire. So those are the comments I would like to make, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'm sure they will be recorded in the minutes. Sorry, next, Mr. Price.
Is Councillor Wilcox.
Councillor Wilcox, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I fully support the revenue final budget and medium-term financial plan. I think it's an excellent example of what you can do with money, and I fully commend what the leader and her cabinet have done. If only I had had a smidgen of the resources available, because it was cut during my tenure, and it was really difficult to find anything that could remain the same. So what Jane Mudd has done this year is outstanding. She's used the money wisely, correctly, for the benefit of the people of Newport. And as my last budget, after almost 20 years, I can think of no better way to spend the money on the people of Newport than the way that is detailed in this report. So on St David's Day, da iawn pawb.
Thank you very much, Baroness Wilcox. Mr. Price, next, please.
No one else has indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so if not, we'll move on to the vote now then, please.
Unless the leader wants to come back, or Councillor Jevons wants to say anything.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that.
Sorry, I have indicated.
Hang on, hold on, please. So we've got, I think
Councillor Routhley has just indicated in the chat.
That's fine, of course. Councillor Routhley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and sorry to cause such confusion. We're also experiencing technical problems here today, but there we are. It's good to be able to support this budget today. It's the correct thing to do. We, as a responsible party in waiting, will always do the responsible thing before we get to the civic centre in our masses, provided that the electorate decide to vote for change. We have constantly asked for community charges, council taxes to be lower here in Newport. We also recognise the efforts of the national government in Westminster for what they've done over the last 2 years in helping bring in Wales back to this stage by supplying the money to the Welsh government, who has been able to supply it here. So, like Councillor Evans, we and I support this budget, and I'm glad after long times of saying it, it's nice to see you are finally listening to us and the people of Newport. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Routhley. Are there any? Is there anybody else who wishes to speak before I call upon the leader and/or Councillor Jevons to sum up, please? Anybody else wish to speak? No.
No, sorry, Mr. Mayor. Only to say fund the civil. They need it.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. That'll might be duly recorded in advance of the election. Right, so now we move on to the leader summing up. Would that be it then, or just do you want to say something as well, Roger? Councillor Jevons, I mean.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Just to sum up on that, and I'll keep it very brief because it was a detailed report by the leader. I believe truly that we've listened to the asks of the residents of Newport. And I'll just go back to Councillor Whitehead's football manager reference when it says it's easy to comment about the way the team is managed when you're not actually the manager of that team, which is a good analogy, but we've listened, but more importantly, we've listened to the residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jevons. Leader, now, if you wish to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do appreciate that, and as always, it's really important, isn't it, to listen to the comments of colleagues, and I'm quite interested in terms of what people have to say. Firstly, can I say I'm really pleased that there's so much support for our budget this evening, and I think there are a few points of clarification that I'd like to make in terms of some of the points that have been made, if I may.
Yeah.
So Firstly, Mr. Mayor, somebody's mentioned the amount of money going into housing and homelessness. I'd just like to make it very clear that we've got a £15 million budget for that. The sum referred to in the budget, in the revenue budget, is additional funding to go into that, and it's really important to be clear about that. Likewise, I think one person mentioned investment in CCTV, and we know of course that we've achieved £700,000 of funding from Safer Streets to invest here in Newport, and all of this has been reported back previously and appears in the report. So if colleagues would like to take the time to take a deep dive into the report, I'm sure that they'd be able to see that. On the point about investment in education, this is an investment in education which is over and above inflation, and if I can refer colleagues back to the previous report on our Treasury management and capital investment strategies, I did highlight £75 million of capital expenditure going into schools through our Band B programme, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is match funded by our Welsh Government, and that includes significant capital investment in improving the learning environments in both Baysleg and Cullion comprehensive schools. So just wanted to highlight that and really just give people an assurance that they are actually there within that budget, because they are points that colleagues have raised. Now it's really interesting. So what did Councillor Evans say at the beginning? Oh, a pre-election giveaway. Councillor Whitehead also claimed this was about electioneering. Councillor Townsend has put forward a range of comments for the next administration. It's quite interesting, isn't it, that to sit here and listen to what people have got to say. I'll just reiterate what I've already said. We are only able to do this because of the generous settlement that we've had this year from Welsh Government. And whilst we're considering what UK government may or may not be giving us, can I just remind colleagues of the lack of investment in infrastructure here in Wales by UK government compared to the spending on HS2 in England? And can I also remind colleagues that the £20 million Levelling Up Fund bid that was submitted by this local authority, this Welsh Labour local authority, to the UK government was rejected. So let's keep this firmly in context when we are considering these items. Now, to go back to my original point, this Newport Labour budget prioritises people and it invests in place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Jevons, have you any further comments, please?
No, the Leader's just summed up, Mr. Mayor. It's now just the vote.
Yeah, I know we need to move the vote, Gareth. We've been here a little while already. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just, as a supplementary, in answer to the Leader regarding the funding for the homeless, obviously it's additional funding granted to the homeless. None of us are stupid, mind. None of us are stupid. I'd like you to bear that in mind. Condescending nature you often have.
I think we'll move on from that. Thank you. Right. So can we? Oh, so colleagues are aware that everybody can see them on camera and recorded and broadcast everywhere. Right. So thank you. So if that's been done now, we'll now move on to the vote. I think, right, all right, Mr. Price, we move to the vote now?
Yes, right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can we find the voting box again, please? Oh, excellent. Members are now to submit their vote, please. Okay, that then is passed. Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll now move on to item 11, which is the Welsh Language 5-year strategy. Once again, Leader to present, please. You're still on mute, I think, Leader.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, colleagues, then, I'm really, as I start to present this strategy, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think it's important that we note the recent death of the Welsh Language Commissioner, Aled Roberts, on Sunday the 13th of February. Aled was a former leader of Wrexham Council and an Assembly member for North Wales region in 2011, and he was a strong champion for the Welsh language, but actually a really decent person as well, and I think it's important that we do remember him as we present this to Council. Now, the Council, as you know, is subject to a number of Welsh language standards imposed by the Welsh Language Commissioner. Standard 145 places an obligation on the Council to promote a 5-year strategy, which sets out how we propose to promote and facilitate the use of the Welsh language in Newport. The standards also require that the strategy must include a percentage target for increasing or maintaining the numbers of Welsh speakers in the area, and a statement setting this out how this will be achieved. Now, we're delighted to present our second Welsh language promotion strategy, which builds on the links, good work and progress made over the last 5 years. The strategy represents an evolution from our 2017-2022 plan, with a focus on delivering a vision for Welsh language in Newport that includes all of our diverse communities, works in partnership with key stakeholders, and meets our statutory obligations. The strategy reflects Newport as a Welsh city with rich, multicultural, multilingual communities. We want to celebrate the Welsh language as part of our shared identity and increase the opportunities for everyone to see, hear, learn, use and love our national language. It also brings together exciting Welsh language work across a range of areas, including our new Welsh in Education strategic plan and our work with the Public Service Board partners through our Right Skills Board. As well as focusing on the growing range of partners and stakeholders who are engaging with the Welsh language, we continue our commitment to develop our internal structures and policies to support staff who wish to learn Welsh or to use their skills in the workplace. This strategy will provide a drive and focus for the next 5 years as we continue to raise the profile of the Welsh language across the city, supporting the Welsh Government to reach its target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050 and create a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Is there a seconder for this, please? Welsh speaking, Jason.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that. Thank you.
That's what I was just going to suggest, Jason. I thought you wanted to put your name forward that. So are there any comments on this report, please? No, as far as you can see, Mr. Price, nobody wishes to comment.
Oh, Councillor Davis, sorry. Councillor Davis is
Deb Davis, yes, thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Mayor. Apologies, Jason. Apologies. I just wanted to say, as Cabinet Member for Education, how much I welcome the work that's been undertaken to develop this Welsh strategic plan in Newport, and it certainly works tightly, works hand in hand with our Welsh education strategic plan, which was presented to Cabinet in January and is currently sitting with Welsh Government for final approval. It's vital that we work together to develop and strengthen the Welsh language in Newport, and we work with Welsh Government to ensure that we achieve our target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Are we still okay, Jason, on that?
Yes,
Sorry,
can I say a few words if that's okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, which can you?
So first, I'd just like to reiterate what the leaders said in passing our sympathies to Aled's family in Wrexham and friends, and like the leader, acknowledge the fantastic work he did for the Welsh language. So colleagues, as we do celebrate St David's Day today, I will talk firstly, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor, in Welsh. In the many years, it's been a few years, I think, since Cabinet actually said anything in Welsh in detail. So it seems an opportune moment on St David's Day for us to change that. And if I could just say to the young people in Newport as well who are learning Welsh, then who knows where that journey will actually take them. I will say a few words the same in English at the end, Mr. Mayor. So mae'r strategaeth yn cyflwyno gwleidigoliaeth y cyngor ar gyfer yr iaith Cymraeg yng Nghasnewydd. Bydd pawb yn gallu gweld, clywed, dysgu, defnyddio a caru'r Gymraeg. Bod ein targed ar gyfer twf yn canolbwyntio ar addysg, rydym yn cydnabod bod angen uchelgais ehangach ar gyfer y Gymraeg yng Nghasnewydd mwyn gwneud yr iaith yn hygyrch a gynhwysol fel y gall y holl drigolion ymgysylltu â hi. I gyflawni hyn, rydym wedi datblygu tair them strategol sy'n canolbwyntio ar gymunedau addysg, diwylliant ac hefyd chyflogaeth a sgiliau. Mae'r gamau gweithredu sydd ymweld â'r themau hyn wedi gynnwys y strategaeth, a bydd yr rhain yn cael ei hadolysgu'n barhaus yn enwedig yng ngoleuni'r data cyfrifiad y sensws newydd, ac ar ôl dweud mwy wrthym am y brofiad ieithyddol yn Casnewydd. Byddwn hefyd yn defnyddio'r strwythurau llywodraethu presennol i fonitro'r cynnydd a strategaeth i gynnwys drwy'n bwrdd sgiliau gywir, y grŵp gweithredu iaith Gymraeg ac hefyd fforwm yr iaith Gymraeg yn y dinas. Adroddir gyhoeddus ar gynnydd y strategaeth fel rhan o'r adroddiad blynyddol yr iaith Gymraeg a gyhoeddir fel rhan o'r adroddiad bob blwyddyn ariannol. Diolch yn fawr, Mair. So just moving on, I know that leaders touched on it, the strategy, as we've said, is the Council's vision for the Welsh language in Newport. And everyone will be able to see here, learn, use and love Welsh. So although our target for growth is education focused, we do recognise the need for a wider ambition for the Welsh language in Newport, and in order to make it an inclusive, accessible language which all our residents can engage with. And things have changed dramatically, Mr. Mayor, over the years. As we can see even tonight, we're being able to hear Welsh in our own council. But also I'd add the remarkable sort of transformation of Newport in relation to its Welsh school provision as well. To achieve this, we've developed 3 strategic themes which focus on education, communities, culture, employment and skills, and a series of actions relating to these themes are included in the strategy. So we will use existing governance structures to monitor progress of the strategy, including through the Rights Skills Board, Welsh Language Implementation Group and Welsh Language Forum. So progress on the strategy will be publicly reported as part of our Welsh Language Annual Report, which is required to be published every financial year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy Day to you as well.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr, really. I always reflect, I sat around these meetings, either virtual or face-to-face. We actually have, I'm a Williams, you're a Hughes, we've got a Price, we've got an Owen, we've got an Evans. So really the Welsh language isn't very far away from those people. For those of us whose, for different reasons, families fail to pass on the language, I think we do regret it to varying degrees. So I personally welcome the Council's ambition for the language. We just need to deliver on it, as we know. Just do it, don't talk about it, isn't it? Right. Thank you very much. So now we move to the vote on that, please. Yeah, okay, we got that box again. Okay, members now vote, please. Okay, that is passed. So now we've got item 12, Regional Population Needs Assessment, Social Services and Wellbeing Act. The leader, once again, please. Councillor Mudd, where have you gone?
I'm here, Mr. Mayor, with my slow internet connection, but I'm with you. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Mayor. And I'm really pleased to present this report this evening. As set out in the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act 2014, local authorities and local health boards must enter into a partnership to carry out a joint assessment of people who are in need of care and support, and to identify the range and levels of social care services required to meet those needs, producing one population assessment per report per local government electoral cycle. So the Joint Population Needs Assessment, now before us, has been overseen by the Gwent Regional Partnership Board. It's been undertaken in accordance with Welsh Government guidance and in consultation with all partners and key stakeholders. And the Regional Partnership Board are now seeking approval from Newport City Council prior to submission to Welsh Government. Once this is agreed by all of the partners, it will then form the basis of the joint regional action plan to meet the assessed social care needs through partnership working and collaboration. The social care assessment process has been aligned to the regional wellbeing assessment, which is undertaken by the Gwent PSB, and it's also consistent with our Newport City Council corporate plan objectives. Partners across the PSB and the RPB will work together to ensure that the priorities identified by it and those identified as part of the wellbeing plan are aligned and provide the best opportunities for joint working. Now, the statutory themes as set out by Welsh Government are children and young people, older people, health, physical disabilities, learning disability, autism, mental health, sensory impairment, carers who need support, and violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. Within Gwent, the current PNA has identified and reinforced existing areas of need and priorities for action, including continued support for looked after children and the reduction of out-of-county placements, ageing population, loneliness amongst older people, an increase in people living with dementia, carers and the need for access to information, respite and mental health support, the need for emotional well-being and mental health support across the region, to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and long COVID, and to support vulnerable groups, including people living with learning disabilities, physical disabilities and autism. Engagement with citizens is a key requirement under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and the PNA has been developed and includes qualitative data from a range of citizen groups. As required, the Regional Partnership Board will develop a regional area plan for publication on the 1st of April 2023 and will set out how the identified need will be met through partnership, working and collaboration. Now, as members of the Council, we're asked to consider the highlighted need in the PNA and how this reflects the need experienced within Newport, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Do we have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cochrane. So are there any comments on the report, please? No. Mr. Price, do we have anybody wishing to speak?
No one has indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So if not, we'll move straight to the vote.
Mayor, I'd raise
Councillor Cochrane is.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, so sorry, I see that. So, Councillor Cochrane, you'd like to speak about it as well as seconding it, would you?
Yeah, I would if that's okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the Regional Partnership Board for complying this this very detailed population needs assessment, 60 pages long to be honest. And clearly this has been done in partnership with the health, local authorities, third sector, and also aligns to the Public Service Board. It's also important for us to be aware of the population needs assessment, because as a council it allows us then to develop and prioritise our needs. If I can give you some examples, and I do sort of suggest that members really read this report. Maybe a couple of times I had to read it twice because I was amazed at some of the things that was in there. It's a big shopping list. But some of the things that improving the services for older people, as the leader have set out, I wasn't aware by 2030 a third of the population in Wales will be over 60. Now, you know, that's an amazing statistic. Elderly people feel isolated. Mental health for children. The services, we need to really start moving on the right line for that. 1 in 10 child will have some sort of mental health issues. There's over 500,000, that's a fifth of the population of Wales, have hearing or sight loss. Learning disabilities, over 12,000 people across Gwent have learning disabilities. Carers save 8 billion apparently, sorry, wrong, across Wales. We have 22,000 carers in Newport alone. Paid carers are only on £64 a week. That's £1.85 an hour. You know, we got to start looking at some of these things, and I think that's why the population needs assessment is so important for us to make sure that we get on top of some of these things. And it's a big shopping list, as I said earlier on, but we need it. So I just like to emphasise again, I recommend all members to look at it, and a special thanks to the Regional Partnership Board for putting this together.
Thank you. But points well made. Are there any further comments on the report, please? Mr. Price, we can't find anybody else.
No one else is indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so if nobody else wishes to speak about it, we'll now move to the vote, please. Okay, that is passed as well. So next is item 13, which are questions to the Leader of the Council. So now we move to open questions for the Leader of the Council. They will be asked in the ballot list order sent out earlier today. Before we start, does the Leader have any announcements to make, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. I do have some announcements. So I'd like to begin this evening, Mr. Mayor, by extending my thanks to everybody who was involved in the storm response last week. I think it was a really excellent demonstration of how prepared we are as an organisation and how we can come together to tackle a very challenging situation, from smooth and successful evacuations of residents to responding to around 40 reports of fallen trees and branches, and liaising with our partner agencies to ensure a full and appropriate response to situations as they arose on the ground. Our teams really stepped up. It's always been a difficult decision to close or suspend services, but the safety of residents and staff must be the priority. But again, we did everything that we could to return to normal as quickly as possible. Waste and recycling collections being a prime example. So a huge thank you to everyone who played their part in protecting Newport last week. Turning to the economy, Mr. Mayor, I'm really delighted to say that we've had some excellent news regarding businesses in the city. So a proposal by SPTS, one of Newport's most prestigious businesses, to expand on a new site in the city was recently given the green light by planning. The company, which manufactures and sells next generation technology for the semiconductor and microelectronics industry, has been based in Newport for over 40 years. I'm incredibly pleased that they've chosen not only to stay in Newport, but to expand, and the new Welsh headquarters in Imperial Park will almost double its footprint in Newport, bringing an additional high technology and high value jobs to the region. Now, Mr. Mayor, I'm absolutely delighted that colleagues have been able to visit the Newport market and look at the really sensitive £5.5 million restoration that's been undertaken. I think it was a great opportunity. Certainly I attended the visit with Cabinet colleagues, and I know that members across the council had an opportunity to visit that as well. And I really do hope colleagues go along, as we know the market will be opening towards the end of next week. And I do hope colleagues go along to visit that. Now, Mr. Mayor, today you and I attended our first Platinum Jubilee event in Newport as part of the Queen's Green Canopy initiative. Every school in Newport has been given the opportunity to plant a new tree. Now, 5 of our schools, all of which celebrated their official opening in 1953, the same year as the coronation, are also hosting special tree planting events. So today, colleagues, I was joined by dignitaries, including Mr. Mayor, as I've said, the Vice Lord Lieutenant and the High Sheriff of Gwent at Mays Glass and Alway primaries. We were treated to custom-written songs and were honoured to present school awards. Over the next 2 days, we'll also be visiting Gare, St Julian's and Malpas Court primaries to participate in their tree planting and mark their 70-year anniversaries. It's been such a great way to kick off the Jubilee celebrations in Newport. We want to encourage celebration across our city, and we want communities to come together. Schools are at the heart of these communities, so it really does feel very appropriate for our students to help us mark such a momentous occasion. And planting the trees in the grounds of all schools will not only be a lasting reminder of the Platinum Jubilee and 20 years of Newport being a city, but will also improve the school environment and our wider ambitions and our carbon neutral strategy. Now, Mr. Mayor, it would be completely remiss of me at this stage not to mention the fantastic support of my fellow leaders here in Newport City Council. So you will recall at the last council, I invited members to join me in a fair campaign pledge. So we've committed to this pledge, and I'd like to thank Councillor Evans, Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Townsend for their commitment to that. And we've committed to focusing on facts and respectful debate about differences of policy or priorities, not insults or intolerance, misinformation or misogyny, discrimination or division. We're endeavouring to treat everyone with courtesy, kindness and respect. And as leaders, we've committed to standing together to call for an end to abuse. Our commitment is to participate in a fair election campaign based on positive campaigning and merit, rather than personal attacks and smears against individuals. So once again, Mr. Mayor, my thanks to colleagues for supporting me in that. Now, earlier this morning, I was able to visit Newport Transport to be present at the launch of the free bus scheme. I'm really delighted that our bus passengers here in Newport will once again be able to travel free on selected bus journeys within the city of Newport this month. In December, you will recall that we decided to fund a similar offer, which received positive feedback from both residents and businesses, with a marked increase in the number of passengers compared to the same month in 2020. I'm so delighted that the Burns Delivery Board has decided to extend this initiative and fund a further free bus scheme during March. I thank the board and Welsh Government for this important support for the city and for the residents. As the public health situation looks set to improve, and with spring around the corner, this will be a great opportunity for people to find alternative and greener ways of travelling while staying local to support local businesses. And Mr. Mayor, you will also recall that in the last council, I was asked questions about cemeteries. I'm pleased to announce that we have identified additional funding to make improvements to our cemeteries. And this includes the introduction of safety measures that will enable the vehicle gates at St Woolas and Christchurch cemeteries to open during the week. I'm pleased to inform you that the weekday opening will start tomorrow, and this will coincide with the beginning of the important religious festival of Lent. However, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, I would urge all of those who do drive within our cemeteries to remember where they are, to drive carefully and to think of others who have also lost loved ones by parking respectfully. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. So we now move to the questions. First of all, Councillor Matthew Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, back in November, I asked you what action you had taken or meetings you had arranged with the Talisker Corporation, owners of Friars Walk, in relation to the empty shop units.
Just listening to that last bit of the meeting, sweetheart.
Oh, sorry. Councillor, I don't think you referred to Councillor Evans as sweetheart then.
No, I haven't been called sweetheart by
if the two of you have got
time.
something going, it shouldn't really be aired in the council meeting. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, it was my little granddaughter.
That's fine. So Matthew, back to you again.
Would you like me to start the question again, Mr. Mayor?
I think we need to start again and start the timing again, if we can, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in November, I asked you what action you had taken or meetings you had arranged with the Talisker Corporation, owners of Friars Walk, in relation to the empty shop units and the fact that your administration had already paid them over £2 million in subsidy payments. I think you told us basically that officers were dealing with this. I'm still mystified why you hadn't taken an opportunity even to have some informal discussions, bearing in mind the massive sums involved. And as you know, members take decisions, not officers. I'm not sure what actions you have taken since then, but you might be aware that the former Debenhams in Carmarthen which closed after the Newport branch, is due to be transformed into a hub for health, learning and leisure. So can you please tell us if you have any further updates on the Newport site of Debenhams, and have you considered the possibility of siting the Newport ship there? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Leader.
Sorry, I've got a terrible internet connection today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Evans, for your question there. I think Friars Walk and in particular the Debenhams stories, it is a matter of interest for all citizens here in Newport, and certainly a matter of interest for us as the Newport City Council. So I would reiterate that officers do meet regularly with Talisker, and I've met and I have met with the funders to discuss their proposals and discuss, well, their ideas for the future of Friars Walk. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to disclose any of that information because it's commercially sensitive in nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So next.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the second part about have you considered the possible siting of the Newport ship there? Is that would that be commercially sensitive information?
So, thank you, Councillor Evans. Mr. Mayor, as you're aware, Debenhams and Friars Walk is in private ownership, and Newport City Council cannot determine what should actually go into that site. I'm sure there are a range of options that are possible to be considered for that particular location and for that facility, and I'm sure that there are actually a range of interested parties really putting forward those options at the moment. But for Newport City Council, whilst we might have ideas around that, it's certainly not for us to determine or dictate to the private owners of that site what should actually be located within there. Thank you.
I can appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, but I mean earlier on the Leader of the Council did talk about
order, Mr. Mayor.
The UK.
Are you allowed to come back again?
Thank you.
I had clarification from the first question. This is my supplementary question, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sure the Leader of the Council will be happy to answer it. Because earlier on in the meeting, the Leader of the Council mentioned that the Newport Council hadn't received their bid of £20 million of funding, whereas Carmarthen Council received £15 million of UK government for that particular project. They also used that Debenhams at Christmas, and I know they don't own it like us, but they also used it for small businesses. It would have been an ideal opportunity for us to have used that there. But of course, you know, what I think I'm trying to sort of say is that the ship could potentially be a major tourist attraction. And our bid to the UK government was devoid of any innovation or imagination. Carmarthen Council's bid was accepted on the basis that it was innovative. So surely we should be looking at innovative solutions. And do you not believe that the medieval ship could be a tourist attraction which would fit nicely in the city centre? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Would you like to respond to that, please?
Well, thank you very much for that supplementary question. It's interesting to hear that the UK government are feeding back their views directly to the Leader of the Opposition here in Newport. With regard to the notion of using that facility to display the Newport ship, what I think is really important to note that those timbers are still being dried, so it would be rather premature at this stage to promote Friars Walk and particularly Debenhams as a site for that. It is something that we need to consider in a more medium-term strategy. I would also point out in relation to UK government funding that the UK government chose not to fund any levelling up bid for the whole of Gwent, and it's really important to note that as well. So I believe that answers the supplementary aspect of that question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. We will now move on to Councillor Kevin Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, would it be within guidelines protocol for Councillor Cleverly to ask our question this evening?
Mr. Price, I'm happy with that.
As long as it's the same question, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't mean what who answer.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Councillor Cleverly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leader, after visiting Newport Market last week, I walked through town to see the homeless sleeping in the doorways again. I understood there was 420k provided to prevent homelessness. And according to figures from the Woolwich and the Newport City Council in December 21, it states there are only 13 people sleeping rough. No doubt it's probably more now since December 21. Therefore, I ask the leader, is there a plan and the funding in place to provide those people with the support and services that they require for their needs? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Kamal, we're picking you up again, I think. Leader.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question, Councillor Cleverly. I think if we just pause for a moment and reflect on some of the information that we've discussed here this evening, we will of course recognise that actually there's a £15 million investment in homelessness services here in Newport, and it is important to recognise that. And that investment, as you know, within that there's a focus on rapid rehousing. There's a focus on trying to address those issues around rough sleeping, which we know are very concerning. So in terms of is there a budget, there's significant sum of money being invested in addressing that, and also in terms of addressing some specific issues. So for example, youth accommodation pathways, specialist support through the housing support grant. There's almost £8.5 million going into that, and we put almost £5 million into our homelessness service. Now, members will be aware, of course, of the mission court that was developed as a temporary accommodation solution for rough sleepers here in Newport during the pandemic, and also be aware of the modular accommodation that's being developed here in Newport at Hill Street, and I know members have had an opportunity to look at that. So there is a plan in place, and there is a team of people that work to support people who are in this position. But what we take here in Newport, as in other areas in Wales, is a multi-agency approach. So it's not just about what Newport City Council does, it also relates to what our partners do, the homelessness organisations, the RSLs, and particularly the support that the Woolwich provides for us to people here. In fact, you might recall quite some time ago, the police, when it came to police questions, the police briefing us on Operation Arraton, and the Woolwich have been instrumental to that. And that is having an impact here in the city centre as well. And it really is having an impact not just on the citizens of Newport, but also improving the lives of those service users who are most vulnerable and really, really need that level of support. But actually, Mr. Mayor, we have to really consider, when we're thinking about rough sleeping and we're thinking about homelessness, what we really need to consider here is the structural factors that actually cause that in the first place. And that's why it's so important that we've been able to have that important debate this evening on the impact of the cost of living crisis here in Newport, because it's not just here in Newport that is having an impact, it's all across the UK. People are really struggling, and I'm sure, as Councillor Cleverly is aware from some of the voluntary work that she does within her ward, Mr. Mayor, that people are really struggling, and it is a very, very fragile position for many individuals and many families. And even with all of this investment in place and all of this support in place, we cannot change the policies of the UK government. All we can do is attempt to mitigate it and support people. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Carmel Townsend now, please.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leader, I don't have a question. I'm sure you'll be pleased with that.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm Linton, you're on the spot now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, please can the Leader provide members with an update on the progress of the work of the Gateway Economic Partnership, of which Newport is a founding member?
Sorry, my internet is terrible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Linton. Councillor Linton, I believe that you may be referring there to the Western Gateway Economic Partnership, and I'm really pleased that you asked that question, because this is something that Newport was actually a founder member of, and so it's important that we discuss it here today, and we have an opportunity to discuss the ongoing work that it's been doing, because it is actually building it. And I'm so delighted actually that Baroness Wilcox, who is the vice chair, one of the vice chairs of the all-party parliamentary group, has been so generous in his support of the Western Gateway. So what is, just to refresh people's minds here, the Western Gateway really is a unique pan-regional partnership, and it's unique because it takes into account both England and Wales, and it really is about a partnership across the River Severn, stretching from Swansea to Swindon. So we've come together to try and work and really garner some strong economic growth across our region. So it spans, as I said, those two, our two countries. I think we've got 5 cities, something like that. We've got excellent universities and we've got competitive businesses. So when you think about what we've got across the region, there's a real opportunity here to try and lever in additional funding and additional support, and really that investment, not just from the public sector, but from the private sector as well. So across the Western Gateway, Newport's working in partnership with public sector organisations, businesses, universities, and we're coming together to try and really tap into the potential of the region. So thinking about what does it do overall, what's the work of the Western Gateway, it's got a number of missions. So it aims to contribute £34 billion to the economy and drive up productivity. It aims to attract investment and grow exports by £4 billion. One of the key missions of the Western Gateway is to decarbonise our economy, and when we come together we can work on this and do this. The Western Gateway aims to connect our communities and also to unlock innovation. And I think connecting the communities is really important, because here in Newport we've got the Burns Review, so we've got the Burns Commission implementing the recommendations of the Burns Review, but we've also got the recommendations of the Union Connectivity Review as well, which also highlighted the need to invest in rail infrastructure rather than roads. So really pleased with the outcomes of that, because that reflects the ongoing work. So part of our work across the region is really about connecting our communities, but it's not just about the physical infrastructure, it's about that digital connectivity as well. And Newport's got an important role to play in this, where when you think about all of the businesses that are set up here and really the growth areas that we've got going on here. So we've got huge strengths across the region in advanced manufacturing and engineering, and you've heard this evening me mention SPTS and their expansion here in Newport. It's great to have that level of commitment across the region. Now there will be a delegation from the Western Gateway going to MIPIM to work with and try and attract investors into the region as well, and that's something that we can really start to move forward. But something else the Western Gateway is really seeking to do is generate renewable energy and decarbonise our economy. And there is a lot of work going on in relation to that. And I'm pleased to say that the Western Gateway, one of the areas within our Western Gateway, Oldbury, is actually one of the 4 areas that is left in the bidding, in the competition to take forward nuclear fusion. So there are real opportunities for growth and for clean energy being developed there. What we're very conscious of, though, in terms of the Western Gateway, and again we've touched on this this evening, is that actually while we have got prosperity within our region, we've also got pockets of deprivation, and it's really important there that nobody's left behind and that we do drive this forward. and drive forward growth. And I think what's really exciting for Newport in relation to this is a lot of the advances that have been made and the businesses that are setting up here are actually really really forward looking and future looking, and that is going to be so important to us going forward. And for example, as colleagues are all aware, I'm sure, we've got our strengths around cyber and digital, but we've also got our strengths in terms of data and data solutions. We've got the largest data centre in Europe here in Newport. So we've got those strengths across this this digital ecosystem, if you like, to really make a contribution to that growth and prosperity going forward. In terms of our economic partnership, we've got the work that we do through Cardiff Capital Region, and it's also important to note that Newport, as a founder member of the Western Gateway, is an independent member of this, although we also make a contribution through CCR, and CCR is a member as well. Now, next week, I'm really pleased to say that the Western Gateway will be holding a conference here in Newport at the Wales International Convention Centre, and that is actually such a great platform for the Western Gateway, for people to find out more about it, for people to engage, but also, I have to make this point, there's it's really important having that here in Newport, because actually it was launched in Newport. And so when I look back across the 5 years that we've experienced, whilst we've all been elected members during this period, actually, it really is great to see that some of the initiatives that we've started here in Newport, we're able to grow here and continue here as well. So it really is starting to move forwards. It's been supported financially by UK government as well. And we are really working in a cross-party way at every political level to drive this forward. So thank you, Miss. Oh, sorry, am I? Oh,
no, it's just I wanted to give you the opportunity to finish. That is the end of members' questions. Okay. I could see the look of disappointment on Councillor Routley's face then. But thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Malcolm. So now we will move on to item 14, which are questions to Cabinet members. There are 4 written questions for Cabinet members, and Councillor Mogford is first, I believe. Time limit for asking the question is 2 minutes. Thank you.
Which question shall I ask? Which Cabinet member?
The question 1 is Cabinet member, Deputy Leader, Cabinet member for City Services.
Councillor Jevons. Okay. I've been having a few problems with my internet as well. If I drop out, and I have a few times, it takes me about 15 seconds to come back in. So forgive me if you lose me. I'll be back as soon as possible.
Thank you, yes.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, in modern times, we are seeing our country lanes suffer from increased usage due to changing habits and lifestyles, resulting in increasing numbers of HGVs, delivery vans, cars, pedestrians and cycles using and sharing these country lanes. With many lanes having a speed limit of 60 miles an hour, we are seeing these same lanes collapsing, flooding, and sadly presenting a clear and present danger to drivers, cyclists, horse riders and pedestrians alike. Given that the Council is promoting a number of initiatives, such as the environmental emergency and active travel, and taking all these factors into consideration, could the Cabinet member articulate the Council's strategy for dealing with our rapidly deteriorating roads, and in particular the lanes in the semi-rural parts of Newport in wards such as Langstone and Lamwern, but not exclusively? What does the near future hold for our extensive and critical country lanes in Newport? Will they be made safer and user-friendly?
Cabinet member to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, all roads within the city, regardless of their urban or rural nature, are maintained in accordance with Newport City Council's Highway Maintenance Plan and Newport City Council's Asset Management Plan, with maintenance standards in keeping with their function and ordinary traffic expected to use them. As Highway Authority, the Council is and will continue to meet its statutory obligations to maintain the highway network across the city, not just rural roads in Langstone and Lamwern wards. Thankfully, road safety collisions remain exceptionally low on rural 60-mile-an-hour roads across the city, so I would tend to disagree that rural roads are unsafe simply because of the speed limit they carry and the function they provide to the user. Welsh Government has proposed that the national default 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for residential areas in Wales should be introduced as quickly as possible, with a target date of April 23 for the change in the law coming into effect. Reducing the speed from 30 to 20 in these areas could see a number of benefits, including reduced road collisions, more opportunities to walk and cycle in our communities, helping to improve our health and well-being, making our streets safer and safeguarding the environment for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Councillor Mogford, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes. The Cabinet Member mentioned the maintenance plans and other plans that he has. Would he share these plans with members?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Services Plan 2021 and the Hampshire Highways Assets Management Plan are both available on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Question 2 then. Cabinet Member, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member, City Services. Councillor, that's Councillor Hourihane, is it, PH?
Yes, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hourihane. Your chance to ask your question now, please. We lost Councillor Hourihane somewhere. Right, what I do now, I'm proposing we move to question 3, but if Councillor Hourihane does re-emerge, we'll move back to question 2 after question 3 has been finished. That's okay. Right, so this is a question now to the Cabinet Member for Culture and Leisure. Councillor Matthew Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the discovery of the Newport ship. In a recent statement, you said the council is leading the hard work to ensure this important piece of history is preserved for future generations to enjoy. Can you please tell us what your future plans are for the ship and how much funding you have allocated for it? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harvey to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Evans. The council is working with the Mary Rose Archaeological Services to complete the freeze drying of the ship, and a timetable is now in place to ensure this important milestone is finally achieved in the next 12 months. Completion of the conservation will mark the end of the further phase of the project. It will also provide an opportunity to carry out further test reassembly work to enable the project curator to fully understand the complexities of assembling timbers that have been deformed over 500 years of burial, and obviously the impact of the freeze drying. It's only once this work is complete that the practicalities of reassembly will be properly understood, allowing the issue of the final display to be addressed. The medieval ship project continues to be delivered as part of the Museums and Heritage Service, together with the Museum and Art Gallery and the Transporter Bridge. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Evans, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, please. Thanks, Councillor Harvey. I mean, the issue where it's going to be cited is still very important. You weren't, I don't think, on the council when there was a previous Labour administration which actually messed it up. So the ship would have been placed in the Riverfront Theatre basement, but that didn't happen. But what I did ask was how much funding had been allocated for it and in future, and Councillor Harvey didn't mention that, but perhaps I can tell her what the answer is, because as far as I can see, there isn't any capital funding apart from £4,000 allocated in the forthcoming year. Now, surely if it's a long-term project, and as you said, that we're leading the way to ensure this important piece of history, surely we've gone further with discussions over the last 15 years. If it's almost getting ready, why isn't there any capital funding available for the project?
It's getting ready, Councillor Evans, and thank you for your supplementary. And we are exploring some options, but I'm keeping them under wraps. specifically until we got it firmed up. At which point then I will be more than happy to share with all of the council.
So can you just confirm that there isn't any funding available in the capital budget after next year?
Until we know how it's going to be displayed, we don't know how much money we need. So it's like asking me how long is a piece of string. I can't give you an answer to that until we know where it's going to go. These things got to go, as I'm sure you're aware, in an order. And the order is, let's get the freeze drying done, then we'll test the reassembly, and then we'll move from there. But it's certainly not forgotten, Councillor Evans, and it will be displayed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hourihane, are you with us yet? No. We'll move on to the next one. The same thing will apply, though. If before the end of the meeting, Councillor Hourihane is able to ask his question, he will get a chance. Oh, here we go. Councillor Hourihane, you're back with us now?
Sir?
Can we move back to your question now, please?
Yes, please. I'm having a bit of a problem with my my emails, but if I can ask my question. It's to the Deputy Leader.
Yeah, Cabinet Member for City Services. Yes, that's right.
The Burns Delivery Unit recently published its annual report. Can the Cabinet Member update Council on progress? I
think we might have lost you again, Councillor Hourihane. Could the Cabinet Member, obviously Councillor Hourihane has done most of the question. We've got it in front of us.
I'll try again.
Perhaps should I cut in there, Mr. Mayor? It's basically to update the council on the progress of implementing the Burns recommendations.
Yeah, I can see that. So if Councillor Jevons, if you're able to proceed, because Councillor Hourihane has given us most of his question and it is written in front of us, so perhaps you can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting the recent launch that was attended by the leader. The report documents the work that has been undertaken in the last year by the Burns Delivery Group that was established by Welsh Government to take recommendations forward. I want to highlight some of the Newport specific work, given the scale of the potential investment. It is essential that planning and detailed appraisals of options are undertaken to ensure appropriate schemes can be delivered. This has been the focus of the first year, with options being considered for the A48, Old Green and bus facilities at Newport Railway Station. Of these, the A48 corridor is most advanced, with consultation underway on the first section of the A48 and National Cycle Route 88. As options for other elements are developed, they will be accompanied by similar consultation. In addition, we are working with the Burns Rail team to identify suitable options for 3 new railway stations proposed for Newport within the west area and the east area of the city. In the near term, following the success of Council's free bus travel initiative, we have been awarded further funding to the Burns Delivery Unit for an extension in March. Funding is also supporting the provision of a secure cycle hub in the city centre, assisting economic activity and breaking down perceived barriers for active travel. It is evident that no single organisation can deliver all recommendations in isolation, as we continue to work closely with Welsh Government, Burns Delivery Unit and neighbouring authorities to maintain progress. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Councillor Hourihane, do you have a supplementary question, please?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons, for so fully answering the question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we will move on to question 4, to the Cabinet Member for Licensing and Regulation. Councillor Mogford, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Across the city of Newport, many residents are complaining about traffic noise, particularly in this context of the question, those close to the M4 and adjoining trunk roads. Whilst some of these roads have had measures put in place to address and alleviate the noise, it is clear that there are roads such as the A449 from the Caldera where residents are suffering day in, day out from excessive road noise, exacerbated by the recent cutting down of trees and associated vegetation by NCC. Whilst it appears this is potentially a Welsh Government responsibility, does the Cabinet member recognise the very real concerns of those residents affected by this particular type of noise pollution and the effect it can have on their mental and physical health and well-being? Will he therefore lend and articulate his support by writing to the Welsh Government and raising our concerns not only of the noise pollution, but also the associated potential air pollution that goes together and affects those in close proximity to these busy road networks? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. A Cabinet member to respond, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, major trunk roads such as the M4 motorway and the A449 were developed by Welsh Government, and the impact of traffic on local residents would have been assessed at the time when the roads were being designed and constructed. Noise barriers have been constructed where necessary to reduce or mitigate the traffic noise, and, where appropriate, the owners would have been entitled to a grant for secondary glazing. In addition, there is a statutory scheme for compensating local residents under the Land Compensation Act 1973 for any reduction in value of their properties due to disturbance caused by additional traffic on new roads. Therefore, all of these issues relating to traffic noise would have been addressed many years ago. Once the roads have been constructed, then there are no statutory powers to deal specifically with traffic noise. Councillor Mogford suggests that this traffic noise has been exacerbated by the council cutting down trees and vegetation. However, I can assure him that any grounds maintenance work carried out by the council on these roadside verges will have had no significant impact on noise transmission. Where any noise mitigation measures are required, then proper acoustic noise barriers have been constructed between the roads and the adjoining properties, and the trees and vegetation are mainly for visual amenity purposes. With regard to associated air pollution from the traffic, I would refer Councillor Mogford to the detailed information that I have previously provided at Council regarding the steps that we are taking and the significant progress we have made in reducing these emissions and improving air quality. The introduction of the 50 miles an hour speed limit on stretches the M4 by Welsh Government has also had a positive impact in terms of air quality emissions. A key part of the Council's Air Quality Action Plan is the establishment of local action groups to engage with the local communities, because educating the public and encouraging changes in behaviour are essential if we are to improve public health. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, these concerns about public health and well-being can only be addressed as part of the bigger picture and the need to reduce traffic on all roads, as opposed to specific issues about the volume of traffic on these particular routes. That is why the Council has published a sustainable travel strategy and is developing active travel routes and the use of electric vehicles. In addition, Cabinet will shortly be approving a new climate change plan with various measures to reduce carbon emissions, including vehicle emissions. As a result of the Burns report, improvements in public transport we also developed at the regional level with Welsh Government and other partners as part of a strategic transport policy. As the Council and Welsh Government are already taking active measures to address traffic issues generally, and as part of the wider sustainable travel, climate change and carbon reduction agenda, then I do not consider it appropriate or necessary to write to Welsh Government as suggested by Councillor Mogford. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mogford, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Earlier on, Councillor Truman said that he listens, or that this council has been listening to the residents. I don't know how long it took Councillor Truman to write that extensive response. If he did indeed write it, I think he could have just said no to the answer to the question. My question was, does the cabinet member recognise the very real concerns of these residents? He talks about double glazing. What about the people who have to sit in their back garden and they can't because the noise is just too great? But I thank him for his answer, and I think that's as far as it's going to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mogford. Do you have any comments on that, Councillor True?
No, I don't.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Question 5 then now, the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development, Councillor Forsey, I think.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The transformation of the road to nature is an excellent example of community-led partnership working. Will the Cabinet Member share with colleagues an update on how Newport City Council is supporting this transformation?
Thank you, Councillor Forsey, for your question on the road to nature. I propose to give a fairly detailed reply, if that's okay, as clearly there are some here this evening who appear to be completely unaware of the work that's been going on by the council in collaboration with local residents. And it's disappointing also to note recent leaflets that have gone out in the city that undermine the efforts that have been made to transform this area by local people, despite the extensive information that we have shared. In relation to the update, the road to nature, formerly known as LG Access Road, is located off the A48 Coed and runs off Church Lane, Coed. The road was built years ago, but was never fully developed into an operational highway. However, it's still classified as an adopted highway. The wider area is designated as a site of special scientific interest, an SSI. Over the years, the lane has been blighted by large-scale commercial fly tipping and has been used by travellers to set temporary legal encampments, especially in 2004 and 2015. So following an escalation in the frequency amounts of waste being fly tipped, the area became an urgent priority for Newport City Council, and work was done in conjunction with local community groups, political representatives and partner agencies to look for options to stop fly tipping and restore the area. As part of this collaborative work, Newport City Council established a partnership with community volunteers who constituted the Friends of the Road to Nature FRN group, and showed a keen interest in taking part in any activity to improve the area and give it a use and a purpose. A very successful covert surveillance operation was carried out by Newport City Council during 2021, leading to a number of fixed notices being issued and 5 prosecutions and the seizure of 2 vehicles. This was immediately followed by the installation of permanent overt CCTV in the access and main sections of the road to prevent further fly tipping in the area. This measure has proved to be very effective, and no further fly tipping has occurred in that area since monitoring system was installed. In October 2021, Newport City Council also carried out large-scale works to remove all fly tipped waste. Work lasted 10 days with 650 tonnes of waste being removed from the site, including over 1,800 tyres. All waste was sorted into different elements to maximise recovery, and we achieved a recycling rate of over 85%. The removal works were completed by a community litter pick on the 30th of October 2021, organised by FRN with the support of NCC, with over 100 volunteers attending, NCC staff, representatives of partner organisations such as Fly Tipping Action Wales and Keep Wales Tidy, and political representatives attended the event. This marked the start of a new phase based on improving the area and promoting its use. The transformation was impressive and a credit to all those involved. The work, however, is ongoing, and the next steps will include regular litter picking events held at the site to remove historic litter, fly tipping and the bramble verges, the installation of specifically designed heavy-duty barriers to prevent vehicle access as an additional measure to prevent fly tipping. The design and installation of signage to help establish the area as a valued community asset for nature and health and well-being. Initial formal assessments of biodiversity on the site have been undertaken by various interested parties, which is being followed by a formal biodiversity survey to be carried out during 2022 as part of funding secured by BugLife Cymru and supported by Newport City Council. This also includes a programme of events to be delivered via BugLife project during 2022, including art workshops for several different community groups such as school children, scouts, guides, and mental health support and local residents. There are plans for a series of nature biodiversity walks for the community through the spring and summer. So community biodiversity surveying, recording sessions, evening bat and moth walks, pond dipping and other bio-nature based sessions will also be conducted through the spring, summer and autumn. Subject to the results of the survey, there are different elements of Newport City Council's biodiversity team could consider to enhance biodiversity and improve the area, such as lining the road with trees to create a green avenue effect. Newport City Council keeps working in partnership with FRN to maintain the area with the aim to enhance the biodiversity, nature, conservation and public engagement in education. And recent activities there include managing the roadside verges, installing mixed habitat boxes for birds, bats, bees, hedgehogs, reptiles and amphibians, and improving disabled access, creating seating areas, installing benches for people to sit and enjoy the space, along with the additional litter bins that have been put in the area. And longer term, we hope to install wildlife crossings and pedestrian areas. Extending external funding could also potentially be secured via existing grants in partnership with FRN. The main aspirations of those involved for the future, and subject to the necessary consents of formal approval and management by NCC leaders, would be the development of a managed nature reserve, including the road to nature, public footpaths by Newport City Council and owned woodland, and the potential for the adjacent Welsh Government land owned to work in partnership with the Gwent Wildlife Trust. This would support ongoing work for biodiversity, support mitigation across Newport with regards to monitoring local ecosystems and establishing increased and various wildlife habitat and migration corridors, and volunteer lead nature-based action groups, particularly nearby areas to the road and nature. The idea is supported and welcomed by the local community. The area is in proximity to several residential areas, Route 88 cycleway, which is well used by cyclists and for family exercise, and the community is already engaged via FRT social media sites. I hope, Councillor, you will join me in acknowledging that the work done in transforming the area highlights what can be achieved when a council works in close partnership with its community. I'm confident that the exceptional work done by all those involved are just the start of what will be one of the major environmental, nature and partnership success stories of our city and our region in the years to come. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Forsey, I can't believe you've got any supplementary questions.
Well, I would just like to say, please, Mr. Mayor, that I agree that the work of officers and volunteers has been absolutely excellent. The big clean-up day was excellently organised, and I applaud the work to transform an area which was a liability and an eyesore into what is becoming an asset in terms of a nature destination and a biodiversity haven. And I look forward to seeing how it develops, and I think it's an excellent piece of work and really encouraging. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey.
Thank you both. So the next question now is the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, which is Councillor Clark to ask, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and always good to ask a question at 8:30. So thank you very much. My question is, from the 7th to the 13th of February, it was Apprenticeship Week here in Wales. So please would a Cabinet Member provide members with further information on the apprenticeship opportunities for young people here in Newport, both internally within the authority and also with external partners. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Cabinet Member, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm delighted to provide a response to this really important question. To coincide with Apprentice Week, the Council launched a recruitment campaign to hire a new cohort of young people into a range of different departments across our service areas. Our social media channels advertised 10 newly created roles in areas such as trading standards, residential care, flying start and active travel, and 2 of our previous apprentices contributed to a video showcasing the benefits of becoming an apprentice at Newport City Council. These new roles confirm our commitment to providing an entry point for young people into local government, and we look forward to welcoming this group of new recruits in the coming weeks. The Works and Skills team in the Youth Academy actively encourage clients to move into a range of work-based learning activities, including traditional apprenticeships. The Council's Work and Skills team deliver a number of grant-funded projects designed to help people find employment and more rewarding careers, including Inspire to Achieve, Journey to Work and Communities to Work. The Council's business development team provides advice and signposts organisations looking for workplace development opportunities, and Newport City Council itself has provided over 30 opportunities via the Kickstart scheme. The development of the apprenticeship wider offer remains a key Welsh Government policy and is delivered through Business Wales and Careers Wales. These organisations provide advice to businesses and organisations interested in developing the skills and training offer, including apprenticeships. Welsh Government has also introduced the Young Persons Guarantee, which gives all young people aged between 16 and 24 targeted help to access work, education and training opportunities. Communities for Work Plus and Young Persons Guarantee will build on the strengths of the current community employability programmes with support targeted at those furthest from the labour market. As a member of the One Newport Public Service Board, a key wellbeing objective is to ensure that everyone has the skills and opportunity they need to develop, prosper and contribute to a thriving and sustainable city. This is overseen through the Right Skills Board, which is made up of representatives from key sectors. The Right Skills Board works in tandem with the Regional Skills Partnership team, who are themselves a sector intelligence resource, which is used to inform Welsh Government's decision making in the skills development sector. Newport is also fortunate to have a number of good quality employers who offer an excellent range of employment and development opportunities. SPTS, for example, a global leader and a Welsh anchor company with investors and People Gold accreditation. They offer good quality and well-paid jobs and actively promote their graduate programme. They've recently secured planning permission for a site at Imperial Park, which will see significant growth in their workforce. And we are working with all partners to ensure that our young people will have the right skills to support the continued growth of our key employers now and in the future. As a local authority, we have a lot to be proud of in the way we've supported our young people into work and have ensured that they have access to some amazing, outstanding opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Clark, do you have any supplementary questions to that?
Mr. Mayor, no supplementary, thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have just about reached the end of the meeting. Just like to say a couple of things really to round up. Obviously, we're not having a meeting in April. Members will now be aware of that. And I think I'd like to pay tribute is the wrong expression really, but a number of us are retiring at this next council election. And in fact, some of us may actually be retired by the electorate. I'd like to pay tribute though to all of you who've given long service to this council. It's estimated some 245 years of service between those that we know are going to retire. It really is a tribute to you that how well you've represented the community in different wards over a long period of time. I think I'd also like to say that even though, as members will be aware, I'm a different political tribe from many of you, I've always got on quite well with everyone, and I've really enjoyed my time as a member of Newport City Council. And I think that and just a little plug for my mayoral charities, we held a very successful online auction which raised £1,500 for my charities. The mayoress in fact has now bid on did in fact bid and was successful in bidding on kickboxing lessons, so the mayor will be returning to that sport that he practiced for some time, be returning to that now as soon as possible. And really just to round up by saying that we're hoping to have the mayoral meal, which we normally have in Junction 28 in April, and also a concert upstairs in the space in the indoor market. So you'll all be invited to those. I hope you'll be able to turn up and support the excellent charities. And of course, just on a final point, I'm the 389th Mayor of Newport, I believe, and the last one to chair a council meeting. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and well done on your past 12 months as the Mayor of Newport.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Mayor. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well done,
August,
Well done.
I think I'm colouring up now, so I got to go. All right. I'll see the leader tomorrow when we're off on our tree planting again.
Yeah.
And
Jason,
to the rest
ring me
of you.
tomorrow, please?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, bye all.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.